warning in force, and elsewhere watch out for those strong blustery winds with gusts of around 50 to 60 miles per hour, perhaps a bit stronger than that. Because of all the unsettled weather, a mild start to Tuesday morning, but a relatively wet and windy one for many of us. The rain gradually making its way north and eastwards as we go through the day could bring something a little bit wintry over the higher ground. So something a bit dry developing, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, central southern England and Wales, perhaps even a bit of sunshine breaking out. But notice our temperatures will be down a few degrees compared to today, with highs just about into double figures.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then, we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the characters, and perhaps have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way, it is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
But are really just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have been
gay icon.
transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you know, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things that you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
don't say that.
I'm right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 8th of April.
Manhunt. A nationwide search is underway after a mother was stabbed to death in broad daylight in front of her newborn baby. Police name Habiba Massam as the suspect on the run. We'll be live in Bradford.
Payday. Millions of pensioners will see a rise of £900 in their state pension from today as the benefit is raised by a whopping 8.5%. That's more than double the rate of inflation.
And Scotland's new hate crime law, police say they can't cope after receiving thousands of complaints in the first week alone. It sparked fears that other crimes won't be investigated properly.
Now, there's a change today here on GB News, and it's a fun change. It's just bedding in, and we're just getting used to it. But long gone now is the gbviews@gbnews.com email address We've modernised. We've entered the 21st century. Because instead of typing an email in a clunky email client, we now have a website, a dedicated section of the website for your views. It's called gbnews.com/yoursay.
What a fantastic salesman you are.
I love it.
Tom, I'm sold. I'm going to be tapping away, writing little comments when I'm watching other people's shows. I'm watching it now, you know, the comments are coming in and you're all talking to each other, which is fun.
That's the great thing about it. Unlike an email, which is sort of a one-way means of communication, with this new website, gbnews.com/yoursay, it's not only just a one-way comment about the programme. People are replying to each other, we're engaging, we're replying, we're reading out comments, and if you're a GB News member, your comments go right to the top.
Yes, so this is gbnews.com/yoursay. No gaps, no capitals, no nothing. Just gbnews.com/yoursay, and you can get in on the action.
And we're going to today be paying particular attention to comments about this latest Muslim polling. It's been done by JL Partners, a very respected polling company, suggesting that 52% of British Muslims want to make it illegal to show a picture of Mohammed, to display a picture of Mohammed in the United Kingdom. What do you think of that, and what does that say about how integration is going in the United Kingdom?
Yes, we'll read out some more of the shock findings from that polling, including that almost half of British Muslims sympathise with Hamas. Has integration failed in this country? gbnews.com/yoursay to have your say. But first, it's your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just gone 12 o'clock and we start with our top story of the day, that the Labour leader says the NHS is on its knees and he's promised to modernise the health service if his party wins the next election. It's hoped that the plan to digitise children's health records, known as the Red Book, will boost vaccination rates and improve access to healthcare. It would also see parents receive automatic notifications for appointments and health information via the NHS app. Sir Keir Starmer says the plan will bring the NHS into the future.
Everybody has that Red Book knows that it can get lost, it can get forgotten, all the details have to be re-entered, it wastes a huge amount of time, and this is an example of the sort of reform that we want in the NHS. Obviously, everybody will know the NHS is absolutely on its knees. If we're elected into government, if we're privileged enough to come into government, we'll have to pick the NHS up, put it on its feet, but we also need to make it fit for the future, and that's where the reform comes in.
And I just want to bring you some news that we're getting in from West Bromwich this afternoon. Police have launched there an urgent search for an alleged attacker after a 15-year-old boy was stabbed to death near a shopping centre in the town. Paramedics and officers responded to that incident late last night at around 9 p.m, but they were unable to save the teenager. The boy's family, we understand, has been informed since that attack. West Midlands Police are now urging the public to provide any relevant information to them, and they say they are increasing patrols over the coming days. We will, of course, keep across that for you throughout the rest of this afternoon. In the meantime, that latest incident comes as another manhunt is continuing after a woman was stabbed and killed in Bradford while she was pushing a baby in a pram. West Yorkshire Police have released these photos, you can see here if you're watching on television, of a suspect wanted in connection with that attack, which happened in the city centre on Saturday afternoon. 25-year-old Habibur Massoum from the Oldham area is described as an Asian man of slim build, and he was pictured on CCTV wearing a coat with grey, white and black stripes. He is believed to have links to the Burnley and Chester areas, and police there are now warning people not to approach him, and anyone with information, they say, should please contact 999. In other news, millions of senior citizens will feel the benefits of 8.5% increase to their pension today, worth up to £900 for people claiming the full amount. It means last year's rate of £10,600 will rise to £11,500. However, the Liberal Democrats say the so-called stealth taxes will wipe out over 3/4 of that increase as more pensioners are dragged into paying income tax. Well, the Work and Pensions Secretary, Mel Stride, told GB News that the government is committed to supporting pensioners.
We're committed, for example, to the triple lock, which, as you know, is putting up pensions year on year by the greater of 2.5% or earnings or the level of inflation. And I think that's one of the proudest achievements, actually, of this Conservative government, that was brought that in, because it's meant that since 2010, pensioners are £1,000 a year better off than they would have been had their pensions just gone up by earnings alone.
NHS staff, including paramedics and nurses, have been shown pornographic images, offered money for sex and assaulted at work. That's according to new research. A study of more than 12,000 health workers has revealed that widespread incidents of sexual harassment have taken place, with 1 in 10 saying it's something they have experienced at work. Of those, almost a third reported sexual assault. In response to the findings by Unison, the government has said that NHS organisations have a responsibility to protect their staff and patients. The Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, has denied claims that the government is failing to prepare for war. 2 former defence ministers say Britain isn't ready for conflict, suggesting some ministers are just hoping that threats will go away. James Heappey and Ben Wallace cited examples from allies like Sweden, where the public are given war preparation guidance, including a booklet explaining what to do in a time of war. The intervention from those 2 long-serving ministers comes as Rishi Sunak is facing pressure to increase defence spending. And finally, before we hand back to Tom and Emily tonight, tens of millions will be looking to the skies for what's set to be the most viewed total eclipse ever. While the weather might eclipse the excitement for some, it's a different story in Canada, where the clear skies are set to bring near-perfect viewing conditions. In Niagara Falls, though, there has been a state of emergency declared to manage the biggest crowd of visitors ever expected to flock to the popular waterfalls. And here in the UK, some of us will get a glimpse of a partial eclipse in the west and north, including in Belfast, Glasgow and Liverpool from just before 8 o'clock tonight. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. You can, of course, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code there on your screen, or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, a nationwide manhunt is underway for a 25-year-old suspected of stabbing a young mother and pushing her baby in a pram in broad daylight.
Yes, well, every police force up and down the country is searching for Habiba Masum. There he is. That's the chief suspect here following the incident in Bradford. He's believed to have links to the Burnley and also the Chester areas.
Well, let's cross straight to Bradford now, where our reporter Anna Riley is on the scene. Anna, take us through what happened.
Good afternoon. Yes, we're here in the Westgate area of Bradford where the stabbing occurred. It happened on Saturday afternoon in broad daylight, like you say, around 3:20 in the afternoon. A 27-year-old mother was the victim of the attack. She was pushing her baby in a pram as the attack happened. People around her in the area, witnesses, tried to help her and save her life, but tragically she died. Now, that nationwide manhunt is continuing. Every police force in the country looking for Habiba Masum, a 25-year-old man. He's described as slim and Asian. CCTV footage shows him wearing a coat with 3 different colours and a light grey or blue tracksuit and a grey hoodie. Police are saying do not approach this man if you see him, but report any sightings to them on 999, and anybody with information should come forward. We've been speaking to a local greengrocer, Gio Khan. He was a witness as to what had happened. He helped the woman at the scene, and this is what he told us earlier.
So when I looked, she was lying down, and the head was down, and all I see at the back, and the baby was, the pram was there, and then I tried to check her nerves, pulse, and she wasn't there, the pulse. Then within a few minutes, Asian doctor come and he goes, look, I am a doctor and let me check her. And he had his bag with him and he started checking her. And what we did, we turned her over and the blood was all over, on the floor, on her body. And then there was stabbing marks, well, not marks, but wound on the neck. It was disgusting, actually. I couldn't take it in, but I tried my best to, calm myself down.
Just truly shocking what Gio Khan witnessed. He said that the woman was a customer of his shop, that she'd been going there for several weeks. He said that she was a lovely woman who was warm and always had a smile, and that his heart goes out to her family and of course the child as well, who will be now brought up without a mother as a result of what's happened. Police say that the victim was known to Masoom. They haven't gone into detail as to what that relationship was, but that the two were known to one another. The community are understandably shocked and saddened by what happened over the weekend, and there's been local church and religious groups that have been going out and giving reassurances to people in the community. We spoke to Reverend Duncan Milwain earlier of Bradford Cathedral, and this is what he said.
What I think we want to do is to not allow this incident, terrible though it is, to drive a narrative about Bradford. Bradford is a city of faith, a city of hope. Only last week, during Holy Week, we were talking to people about how this is a really great place of faith and of hope, and we don't want this to now skew a narrative about this brilliant city.
Reverend speaking to us there. Police have said that they can understand the shock and concern that this would cause in the community, and that there will be a police presence that continues to reassure people. And as that manhunt continues, we will be providing updates as we have them.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Riley there, our reporter in Bradford, bringing us the shocking details of that crime. Interesting, some of the papers are reporting this morning a little more about the suspect here, that he is a blogger from Bangladesh, moved to the UK to study for a master's degree in digital marketing at the University of Bedfordshire, and that's according to his LinkedIn profile. So a little more information on this suspect, where he came from and what he was doing. So there you go.
Absolutely, which does explain perhaps to some extent how this is a UK-wide manhunt, not limited just to Bradford, of course. So the police will be looking out in every police force across the country.
Yes, we'll bring you any updates when and if we get them. But of course, to reiterate, do not approach the suspect is the advice, but call 999 immediately if you do believe you've spotted him.
Well, in other news, perhaps in slightly better news for many people watching, the state pension rises today by 8.5%. That's an extra £900 a year for some, as the government's triple lock commitment remains in place.
But here's the catch. This comes as an estimated 2 million pensioners will be forced to pay income tax in the next 4 years due to the government's stealth tax freeze, the freeze on tax allowances. So are pensioners really better off? That's the question.
Well, the man to do the maths is our very own economics editor, Liam Halligan, who's here with On the Money. So, Liam, are pensioners really better off?
There's quite a lot of detail here, Tom. It's quite an important day. It's Monday, the 8th of April. It's the beginning of the new fiscal year, if you like, the new tax year. And so it's the day when the new basic state pension comes in. And it's partly good news, but there is a catch, as Emily says. Let's just have a look at some of the details. The first thing to say is that the triple lock applies. The triple lock was that coalition-era policy brought in between 2010 and 2015 by the Tories and Lib Dems, that the basic state pension goes up by 2.5%, or the rise of earnings, or the rise of the consumer price index, whichever is greater. And it turns out that last September, that's the benchmark they use, average earnings across the UK went up by 8.5%, and that means that the basic state pension goes up from 8.5% by today. Our basic state pension is pretty low by Western international standards, but it has at least gone up. What are the details? Well, the basic state pension goes up to £221. That's a week, from £203.85. That's for those who qualified for it since April 2016. And pensioners who qualified for the basic state pension before April 2016, so they're older, they get £169.50 a week now. That's 8.5% higher than £156.20, which it was before. That's if you qualified from April 2016. So they're the basic headline numbers that apply from today. So what's the point that Emily was making there in the introduction? The point that she was making is that because the personal allowance, 12.5 grand roughly, after you earn that amount, you start paying income tax. Because that's been frozen all the way to 2028, and because the basic state pension is going up, and because people pay tax, income tax, believe it or not, on the basic state pension, more and more people on the basic state pension will be dragged into that tax-paying bracket. So the basic state pension headline is going up, but the tax that you'll pay on it is also going up a bit. And that will leave, we think, about 2 or 3 million pensioners actually worse off over the next few years because of that frozen personal allowance, what we call a stealth tax, a tax increase that doesn't come from the increase in the headline rate, that comes from the fact that where the tax starts is frozen, even though inflation, prices, earnings and the basic state pension and everything else is going up. So the headline is good news, but as we're pointing out now, there is a catch.
And Liam, there is a bit of a debate going on as to whether pensioners should have to pay income tax on the state pension and their income. Tell us a bit about that.
There certainly is. It's a huge amount of money when you think that 12 million people pay income tax. The basic principle of pensions in this country is that you don't pay tax when the money goes into the pension, but you do pay tax when the money comes out of the pension. So if it's a state pension or a private pension, you do pay tax on that pension if indeed the return on the pension is more than the personal allowance, which is currently frozen, as I say, at about £12,500 a year. And another aspect of this, as if it wasn't complicated enough, is that the government, of course, has just lowered the headline rate of national insurance twice in a row, once in January, once again at the beginning of this month, from 12% to 10% in January, then from 10% to 8% in the last week or so. And there's Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, telling the House of Commons about that. But, of course, the thing about a national insurance cut is that it doesn't apply to pensioners. It only applies to people who are actually in work. So pensioners will not get this same headline tax cut that people in work will get, because the basic rate of income tax is staying where it is, of course. And a lot of pensioners feel aggrieved about that. You know, some people in work, particularly a lot of younger people, will say, hang on, the pensioners, they often own their own homes. They're often quite wealthy. The basic state pension is what we call a universal benefit. Everybody gets it, despite their income. So, you know, some well-off people use the basic state pension to top up their wine fund or, you know, their annual skiing holiday, or they just give it to their grandkids, where, of course, other people on the basic state pension, there is still a fair amount of pensioner poverty in this country, particularly those who qualified before April 2016, as we saw, because not many journalists point this out, but they do get a lower basic state pension. I think the government's trying to square off pensioners. There are 12 million of them, as I say, who receive the basic state pension. They tend to vote. It's what we call the power of the grey vote. They vote in bigger numbers, bigger proportions than younger people do. And so that's why the government and indeed the Labour Party have been quite early to confirm ahead of an election that the triple lock will stay in place, whichever of them wins the general election and forms some kind of parliamentary majority. But despite that triple lock, despite the fact that lots of younger workers don't think the triple lock is fair, a lot of pensioners will still feel aggrieved because the basic state pension is actually quite low, as I said, by international standards, and also because some of them, several million of them, are now going to start paying tax on that basic state pension in the next few years because of that frozen threshold. So it's quite a complicated situation, but I hope we've managed to get across the gist of it.
I think we have. Thank you very much indeed, Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor. So I guess the question to our viewers and those of you at home, gbnews.com/your say. Let us know. Do you feel better off because of this rise? Do you think this is a generous rise? Do you think it should be more? Do you think the triple lock is sustainable? Let us know your views.
Yes, £900, it's a considerable amount of money, but of course some of that might be eaten away by a bit of tax for those that have private pensions on top of their state pension. That's not everyone. So some people will still have a tax-free pension entirely.
Because it doesn't reach that $12,500 a year.
Exactly.
Well, let us know what you make of it. But don't go anywhere, because up next we're going to be discussing findings which show that over 50% of British Muslims want to make it illegal to show an image of the Prophet Muhammad. We'll dig into some of those other findings too. Shock polling.
This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Can the Church of England not spend their money as they wish?
The Church of England can do amazing things for this country and for the world, and I'm not sure why it's chosen to focus on this specific issue. You know, one of the causes that I've always thought the Church was very good at were things called almshouses, which were basically houses that would be built on church estates for the needy. Not only did they want to spend £100 million on this fund, that they wanted to spend £1 billion on reparations as well. Well, why not spend 100 million or £1 billion on a new generation of almshouses, as opposed to just helping one group of people, black British people? Why not just help all people in need?
Alex?
Well, I just don't understand what the Church of England is trying to do. It's on its deathbed.
Congregations have reduced. I mean, deathbed is maybe a little...
well, look, if we look over 20 years, it's dramatically lower than it used to be. And a lot of criticism from actual Christians come from the values that the Church of England are now propagating. And Justin Welby has a lot to answer for, because, you know, not only are we seeing in the news this mass conversion of illegal immigrants to a gay mass system in the UK, but now we're seeing them spending money, and as Albie actually pointed out correctly, in a way that doesn't really benefit broader society. It benefits a very small group of people. So I just don't know where it's going to end. This committee has also said £1 million's not enough. It's 100 million, sorry.
Church commissioners are now hoping for a target of £1 billion.
I mean, it's woke nonsense, isn't it?
You could make the argument that this is charity. Justin Welby's job is to be a virtue signaller, is it not?
Should charity discriminate? I mean, that's what he's saying. We're only going to give this to people from a specific skin colour or background. I don't think that's very Christian of them.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 12. Now, 52% of British Muslims want to make it illegal to show the image of the Prophet Muhammad in the UK. Plus, 28%, just 28%, said it would be undesirable to outlaw homosexuality in its entirety.
Right, well, these views that differ from the general population were revealed in a new survey released by the Henry Jackson Society. So, from the Henry Jackson Society, we're joined now by the Director of Communications and Policy, Megan Gittos. Megan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Tell us, why did Henry Jackson Society decide to commission this polling? Why is it important?
It's important, and we commissioned it because since the conflict in the Middle East started 6 months ago after October 7th, we've of course seen concerning levels of anti-Semitism amongst the general British public, and as well some quite extremist views held on protests on university campuses, and as well as anecdotal evidence, we're seeing a rise in hate crime across Britain. So it was really important that we ran this poll, but we also had a control group of the British public that we looked at as well to see if we could notice any trends and where the anti-Semitism might have been coming from.
And what trends precisely did you notice? What is of particular concern? Because you asked a huge number of questions.
Yeah, of course. The particular trend that I would really love to highlight was that this poll found younger British Muslims, a group between 18 and 34-year-olds, and those with a university degree, typically held more extremist views. So this came from results such as they're more likely to sympathise with Hamas and most likely to think Hamas did not commit atrocities on October 7th. These answers came from these groups found it more acceptable than not to protest outside of an MP's home, and they're more eager to see it a crime to show an image of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, why that's interesting is if the conversations we've been having in the news, in print, on broadcast, and in wider society about anti-Semitism, we talk about left-leaning university spaces and the younger generation. We think about those groups using social media, they're more likely to attend protests. And so you can almost see where these anti-Semitic views are spreading and where this kind of extremism among the wider British public is spreading. And some of the work we're doing is actually on university campuses as well.
Megan, I too find it interesting, particularly that point that younger British Muslims are potentially more likely to hold extremist views. Now, when we talk about integration policy and we talk about integration and multiculturalism, a lot of people assume that recent immigrants to this country may have stronger views or maybe more conservative or perhaps have authoritarian views on many issues. But actually we're finding that it's, third, fourth, fifth generation younger British Muslims who have stronger views. I'm particularly struck by not only almost half of British Muslims sympathise with Hamas, but also very, very conservative and, dare I say, backward views on things like homosexuality.
Yeah, and this is particularly interesting if we look at the protests outside of schools in the north, particularly the north of England, that we've seen growing over the last 10 years when we talk about sex education and LGBT education among students. And, I know that's a broader held view sometimes that these shouldn't happen in schools, but a lot of times this is just the acknowledgement that gay people and gay relationships exist, and it's causing protests. So I think particularly in Labour-held seats, this could be a problem for the future. If these views, only a quarter of British Muslims in this poll found it undesirable to outlaw gay marriage and homosexuality. Now, that is going to transfer into the Labour vote, particularly when we're seeing if Labour are the next government. They have a number of plans that they want to implement when it comes to broad society and LGBT issues. However you stand on this, I went to a Church of England school, so 20 years ago when I was in primary education, my sex education, even with the Church of England, was quite liberal. It was quite matter of fact, these relationships exist, these relationships exist. We have to take into account how society is changing now. So I think that would be a problem for Labour should they be the next government.
Yes, it's really, really fascinating how I think I've seen a statistic that really corroborates what you're saying here, where the Labour Party holds 10 of the most pro-LGBT seats in the country, but also 10 of the least. And it's that division within the party's base that perhaps won't be clear until they're in government. In opposition, you can hold together disparate coalitions, but in government, that might be a lot harder. Well, Megan, thank you so much for joining us and talking us through your polling. It's been really, really fascinating. Director of Communications at the Henry Jackson Society, Megan Gittos. Thanks very much.
I'm very worried about how a younger generation of British Muslims are more likely to be pro-Hamas or more likely to deny that any terrorism took place. That really, really worries me. Because you would have thought that young people would be more liberal because they've been through our education system, they've gone into higher education. You would have thought that they would have their eyes opened to these things.
Well,
but
it's interesting.
Actually, they're getting more hardline in that
What
respect.
are their eyes getting open to? Where are people getting their information from? Because another one of these statistics was how few British Muslims believe that Hamas raped anyone on October the 7th, when there's been quite a lot of evidence that they did. Well, depending on where they get their information from, it's not that they're ignorant, but they might know quite a lot that isn't so.
Yeah, and the question that we're going to be debating in the next hour is, does this polling show that integration in some parts of the country has failed? Has it been a failure if people have 28%, only 28% of British Muslims in this poll, of course, say it would be undesirable for homosexuality to be outlawed? Quite incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible, given that in 1967 we made homosexuality legal. In fact, Margaret Thatcher voted to make homosexuality legal back in the 1960s. I thought I'd mention that because sometimes the left vilify Margaret Thatcher as some sort of evil homophobe. She was one of the Conservatives that voted to legalise homosexuality in the 1960s and is still, obviously...
And she was always banging on about climate change, wasn't she?
She was as well.
She was quite the progressive.
Well, perhaps on LGBT rights, more progressive than the average British Muslim, according to this polling.
Yes, and do get on to gbnews.com/your say to give us your views on what you've just heard.
Well, very shortly, we're going to be speaking to the businessman Charlie Mullins, OBE, who's claimed that Britain is a sick note nation. That's had wide pick-up in the press after an interview on this very channel. But first, let's get your very latest news headlines.
12:32, good afternoon from the newsroom. A look at the headlines this hour. The Labour leader says that the NHS is on its knees and has promised to modernise the health service if the party wins the next election. It's hoped that a plan to digitise the children's health records, known as the Red Book, will boost vaccination rates and improve access to healthcare. It would also see parents receive automatic notifications for appointments and health information via the NHS app. Millions of senior citizens will feel the benefits of an 8.5% pension boost today, worth up to £900 for people claiming the full amount. It means last year's rate of £10,600 will rise to £11,500. However, the Liberal Democrats say the so-called stealth taxes will wipe out over 3/4 of that increase, as more pensioners are dragged into paying income tax. NHS staff, including paramedics and nurses, have been shown pornographic images, offered money for sex and assaulted at work, according to new research. A study of more than 12,000 health workers revealed widespread incidents of sexual harassment, with more than 1 in 10 saying it's something they have experienced at work. Of those, almost a third reported sexual assault. In response to those findings by Unison, the government says that NHS organisations have a responsibility to protect staff and patients. The Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, has denied claims that the government is failing to prepare for war. Two former defence ministers say Britain isn't ready for conflict and suggest some ministers in government are just hoping that threats will go away. James Heappey and Ben Wallace cited examples of allies like Sweden, where the public are given war preparation guidance, including a booklet explaining what to do in times of war. The intervention from those two long-serving ministers comes as Rishi Sunak faces pressure to increase defence spending. And a British man who ran the length of Africa says he's already planning his next adventure. Russ Cook hopes his challenge will inspire others going through tough times to take up sport. The 27-year-old crossed the finish line in Tunisia yesterday after running for 352 days through 16 different countries and covering almost 10,000 miles. That's the latest from the newsroom. Do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel. Southbound on the M6, all lanes have opened following an earlier vehicle fire from junction 39 at Shap through to T-Bay at 38. There is a lane closure on the northbound side of the M1 to an accident at junction 15 for Northampton, but traffic is coping well. On the eastbound side of the M4, all lanes have reopened on the exit slip road at Heathrow and junction 4. The earlier broken down vehicle has been removed. The anti-clockwise side of the M25 also cleared. An earlier vehicle needed a tyre changed and there was a lane closure, but all lanes have reopened from the Swanley interchange through to the Darrant interchange at 2. And the southbound side of the M5, again all lanes reopened following an earlier issue between Stroud at junction 13 through to 14 for Thornbury. And that's your very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the Princess, and delighted to say joins us now, along with the former head of Royalty Protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the Princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the Princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there was something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past midday, and we've all been enjoying the new Your Say section of the GB News website. That's gbnews.com/Your Say. It's where everyone can get involved in the conversation. Not just a one-way traffic, it's two-way. It's multi-way. You can all everyone can reply to one another. We can read them out. It's a lot of fun. Now, people have been getting in contact about the triple lock. John says 8.5% increase. Thank you, Chancellor.
John is pleased. John is pleased. Good. Sharon says, my husband and I are of the age where we are second-class citizens of the UK's pension scheme. We obviously don't have the same living costs as the younger pensioners. No pensioner, she says, should be paying tax on state pensions.
Well, Sharon, technically they don't. Because the state pension comes under the tax threshold. It's only if you have a private pension on top that you start paying tax.
But it contributes, right? Contributes to
Well, it might push your private tax, your private pension into then therefore paying tax, but you don't pay any tax on the state pension part of it.
No, you don't. But let us know how you feel after this inflation-busting increase. Do you feel it's enough? Do you feel better off? I mean, everything's going up, isn't it, in cost anyway, so money is going less far than it used to.
Yeah, Khan is not happy. He says all pension increases are a farce because the government has fixed it, so they'll claw back some of it. The bribe will make no difference to my voting intentions.
Well, what are your voting intentions, Khan? Let us know. Let us know. But yes, please do continue to get in touch. gbnews.com/Your Say. we've got it memorised now, so hopefully you do as well. Easy to remember. And on the knife attack that we were discussing at the top of the show, the horrific knife attack, stabbing of a lady with her baby in broad daylight. Thankfully, the baby is unhurt, but the woman has perished, sadly. He says, yet another knife crime, Steve says. Just when will this country wake up and hand out proper sentences? 20 years for carrying a knife, 40 years for stabbing, life or even the death sentence, he says, for murder. Those are Steve's views.
Well, of course, gbnews.com/you'll say. We can't say it enough. It's the first day that the whole channel has been using this shiny new comment system, and we hope you're enjoying it as much as we are.
Well, there you go. But in other news, has Britain become a sick note nation? Now, the businessman Charlie Mullins certainly thinks so, and he's calling on the government to find a solution to what he calls work-shy Britain.
Yes, the founder of Pimlico Plumbers wants to solve the nation's workless crisis. Believes the introduction of a state-backed apprenticeship scheme could be the answer.
Well, joining us now is the business tycoon himself, Charlie Mullins, OBE. Charlie, thank you very much indeed. So, what made you write this letter to the government?
Well, I think we're totally ignoring our youth of today to get into the workplace, and apprenticeships just seem to be a thing of the past now. And I think it's time now to have a major shake-up and get, whether they be lazy, whether they, you know, what would you say, don't want to go to work or think they're entitled not to go to work. We need to get people back into work. And I'm not talking about people with mental health. Obviously, they need all the help they can get. I'm talking about just general youngsters that are just hanging around and come up with mental health issues when, you know, it's just a sick note excuse. And we need to give them a future. We need to have a government-funded apprenticeship scheme and give them some form of drive and enthusiasm to get into the workplace and make a good sort of living for themselves.
Do you think there needs to be a stick as well as a carrot here, Charlie? Because there are 1 million job vacancies in the United Kingdom as things stand. Lots of jobs on offer for people, but it seems like more and more people just aren't taking them up.
Well, you're exactly right. Stick and carrot, undoubtedly. I mean, you know, let's not kid anyone. We've got a lazy culture out there, and mainly the younger generation that, you know, have gone through this COVID and staying from home and people working from home, and they just feel that they're entitled to stay at home and draw benefits. And that shouldn't be the case. I mean, you know, I think they should have people on benefits for 3 months maximum if they've got no disabilities or ill health or, you know, mental health issues, or they're not caring for someone. After 3 months, stop the benefits. They need to go to work for 3 months. And I think you'll find immediately there's probably 50% of people will come off of benefits. Yes, we have got to give them some enthusiasm and some drive. And I think people like me, people like Sugar, people like Alfie Best, many of these people have started with nothing and worked their way to where they are today. And that's what they need to do. They need to realise that by going to work, you're part of society, you're contributing to something, and you make something of yourself.
I mean, Charlie, to the government's credit, they are trying to do something about this. They have spoken about how GPs sometimes are too quick to hand out sick notes. But you think they need to go further? You think there should be sort of a nationwide apprenticeship scheme that goes far beyond what we have at the moment?
Exactly it. You've said it in one. A government-funded apprenticeship scheme. When you leave school, you either go to university, the whatever you call the rich ones, the ones that have, you know, got that type of money, or you've got a job, or you're going to a government-funded apprenticeship scheme. And yes, it is too easy to go to the GP and tell him that you've got mental health. Years ago, if you went there, he had to convince you that you had mental health, you know, that you had issues, because, you know, you wouldn't sort of go in there and say, I've got mental health. It would even be telling you that maybe you need a rest, maybe you need some help. But now the people go in and tell the GP what their problem is. And, you know, they know it's loaded. It's like the bad back thing years ago. And I'm not, you know, obviously when I finish the programme, I get all the busybodies coming on telling me, you know, you're like old-fashioned, you're ruthless and that. But the system, what I'm talking about, has worked for years. Go to work, learn a trade, you'll earn loads of money, you'll never be out of work, and you're part of society. And of course, it will cut down on the mental health issues, because all this nonsense of staying at home and Netflix all day, or whatever you call it, and, you know, all the TV shows, not GBNews, of course. That's worth
It's highly educational.
Yeah, but, you know, there's a load of rubbish out there that people are just watching all night, all day, instead of going to work. So yes, we need a massive shake-up. You know, written to the minister and offered my help, and I don't want no money off them. You know what I mean? I mean, if they give me any money, I'll give it to charity anyhow. But you know, the real thing is, you know, to get people into work and give them a future.
Yeah, Charlie, you're so right. You know, we've spoken so much about mental health, and we do talk about it a lot, but to some extent, the best thing for people who are struggling with mental health can be the routine, the reward, the reason to get out of the bed in the morning that is a job. Sometimes that's the best way to get your mind back into an area, out of the doldrums, to banish the black dog and to get back as a functioning member of society. Charlie, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you so much for coming on. And good luck with your campaign.
We should, instead of having national service, we need tradesmen. We don't need soldiers, we need tradesmen. Thank you.
No, cheers, Charlie. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yes, it is true that when you talk about how a lot of young people aren't going to work and how there is a disproportionate number of young people who are off sick with mental health, people do demonise. They say, oh, you don't understand the plight of young people. You're saying that everyone who's on benefits isn't working and doesn't want to work and all this. But actually, if you look at the statistics, it is crazy how this has increased.
And the worst thing we can do for people who are suffering from very real mental health problems is say, oh, just stay in bed. Yeah. Just stay in bed and block out the world. That's not how to... The best thing people can do is probably go for a walk. Get out of bed.
I mean, a lot of people would say absolutely not. That is not enough. But hey...
I'm not saying it's the only thing. I'm not saying it's the only thing. There need to be good mental health services as well, but just giving people reasons to not get up in the morning is not a good thing, in my view.
Well, there you go. Let us know what you make of it. But in just a moment, we're going to be discussing how Police Scotland are coping or not coping with the sheer volume of complaints they're receiving from, guess what, the new hate crime laws. Around 8,000 reports made just in 1 week. We'll have more on that shortly.
Hello, very good day to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It is going to turn wet and windy for many of us in association with an area of low pressure which has been named Storm Pierrick by Meteo France. Nonetheless, it is going to bring some pretty unsettled weather to many parts of the UK. For the time being, though, some decent sunshine across northern parts of Scotland and eastern England. Here, actually feeling pretty warm in the sunny spells, with temperatures here getting into the high teens. Elsewhere, though, turning cooler and a little bit more unsettled because of the wind and the rain that's pushing its way in association with that feature that I highlighted earlier. So temperatures for many staying in the low to mid-teens. As we go later on then, most places are likely to see some outbreaks of rain. Watch out for some heavy thundery downpours affecting the southeast as we go through this evening. And even elsewhere, the rain could be pretty heavy and persistent, especially across parts of Scotland where we do have a warning in force. And elsewhere, watch out for those strong blustery winds with gusts of around 50 to 60 miles per hour, perhaps a bit stronger than that. Because of all the unsettled weather, a mild start to Tuesday morning, but a relatively wet and windy one for many of us. The rain gradually making its way north and eastwards as we go through the day could bring something a little bit wintry over the higher ground. So something a bit dry developing, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, central southern England and Wales, perhaps even a bit of sunshine breaking out. But notice our temperatures will be down a few degrees compared to today, with highs just about into double figures.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, it is 12:50 and Police Scotland simply cannot cope with what's being described as a deluge of hate crime reports under the SNP's controversial new hate crime laws.
Well, that's according to officers on the front line. Now, around 8,000 hate crime reports were made in the first week of legislation coming into force, with further warnings it's being exploited to fuel personal and political vendettas.
Well, joining us now is the journalist and author Ella Whelan. Ella, thank you very much for joining us. It's interesting to see just how many key figures, including frontline police officers, are coming out in the press to say this isn't working.
Yeah, well, also, and politicians, Hamza Yousaf and some of the, some of his ministers and people quite close to him, using words like hysteria and, sort of pinning all the blame on Scots and saying that they are publishing, reporting vexatious complaints and that it's really all their fault. But I mean, what did anyone expect? If you have, legislation which is so broad in its scope for vexatious complaints, so unending in its sort of surveillance and intervention into people's private lives, it was a sort of no-brainer that this was going to happen. I, hope that Scotland is not full of people who genuinely think that this legislation is necessary and have been telltaling. I'm sort of hoping that most of the complaints are vexatious and there's people trying to reveal the ridiculousness of this sort of law overreach. But there's, as many people, Julie Bindel, for example, feminist writer and campaigner, have pointed out, things like the police's ability to deal with rape and assault in Scotland is at the very best inadequate. So trying to heap more pressure on police time dealing with reported hate incidents on online or elsewhere is obviously going to suck resources from where it's really needed. So this is a both practically and politically, I think probably more importantly politically, this is a total disaster.
Total disaster. And do you think, Ella, that the people of Scotland are now less safe as a result of these new laws, if all of these resources are going into policing online speech and the like, and the issue of misgendering may become more of an issue in terms of police resources than, as you say, violent assault?
Well, the misgendering thing is a bit weird because I don't think anyone's quite clear as to whether or not you will actually be clapped in irons for misgendering, because obviously J.K. Rowling did a great service to everyone by challenging Police Scotland to arrest her for saying a man is a man and a woman is a woman on social media. And they sort of very embarrassingly said, oh, no, we're not going to arrest J.K. Rowling because that would have been an utterly ridiculous event. So we don't actually, it's not clear whether the law actually works in the way that it was sort of hyped to work. But I also, having just totally criticised the law, I wouldn't want to suggest that Scotland, or indeed England or anywhere, is sort of a perfect place for free speech before this kind of legislation came in or was suggested. Attacks on freedom of speech are long-standing, and actually police time has been sucked up by surveilling social media, for example, for quite some time. Down here in England, our government has, the Communications Act from 2003. We've just had the Online Safety Bill. We've got the Police Crime Courts and Sentencing Bill that stops protests. I mean, literally, I don't have enough fingers to count and toes to count the amount of legislation that puts sort of a kibosh on our ability to speak freely.
Ella, you're so right to mention all of those acts, and we've covered, of course, people who've had a knock on the door from the police for tweets that they've written before this new Act of Parliament in Scotland, although I think the threshold has now somewhat been lowered, and I think you're absolutely right to pick up upon the ambiguity of this Act, not knowing quite what is within and what is without the terms of the Act. It's a really concerning situation. But Ella Whelan, thank you so much for talking us through it. Really appreciate your time.
Yes, what a reasonable person would consider likely to result in hatred. So
Very,
vague,
very odd,
so
very
nebulous.
I should just mention that I've been looking at some of these comments on gbnews.com/yoursay.
Oh, have you now?
And it is entirely correct. Lots of people have picked me up on the pensions issue. Something called SERPS, the State Earnings Related Pension Scheme, that people get that is more than the basic state pension. Of course, that's taxed because that comes over the threshold in many cases. But the basic state pension is not if you get it alone. Well, much more in the next hour.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Most of us will see some wet and windy weather as we go through the next 24 hours or so, in association with a feature that has been named by the French Met Service, Storm Pierrick, but it is going to bring some unsettled weather to many of us. Watch out for some heavy, thundery downpours across parts of the southeast as we go through this evening. Otherwise, it's strong winds across southern and western coastal parts that could cause a bit of a problem, and then some heavy, persistent rain pushing its way across parts of northern England and into Scotland as we go through tonight and into the early hours of tomorrow. Because of the cloudy, wet and windy weather, temperatures really aren't going to drop much for many of us. So a mild start tomorrow, but a pretty unsettled one too. Heavy persistent rain continuing across parts of Scotland. Could be some winteriness over the higher ground here. Otherwise, some outbreaks of rain for parts of northern England and into Wales, and a few showery spots elsewhere too, but something a bit drier, perhaps even a bit brighter across parts of Northern Ireland, Western Wales and southwest England as we go through the afternoon. Temperatures will be down several degrees compared to today, highs of around 13, possibly 14 Celsius at best. After a bit of a chilly start on Wednesday morning, it is going to turn wet and windy again from the west as some wet weather pushes its way in association with another system that's going to push its way through later on in the week, and there should be something of a drier trend across southern parts at least, and temperatures rising too with highs in the low 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. You're very vexed about these China cyber attacks. Colin says, what the hell is our Secret Service doing? They've only just realised what China's up to. You just couldn't make it up.
We could have told you.
We knew. We're not surprised. So Colin, we agree with you. Quite why it's taken GCHQ or MI6 or whoever it is, MI5. It'd be MI5 to know what's going on.
And Rod has said, thank you, Rod, if you know how you vote, if they know how you vote, coupled with mass data held also on you, do you not believe they can influence your decision-making process in any way? They won't know.
I'm not sure they know how you vote because that's
not on record anyway, is it?
It is not.
And Ken says these are only able to be carried out because of computers, internet, mobile phones, etc. It seems to me that these inventions are ruining our lives, and therefore we were much safer and much happier without these inventions. There is a school of thought that would agree with that, Ken, very much so.
I sort of often think it myself, really.
Me too.
The dark web. I mean,
Yeah.
how many people have been murdered because of the dark web?
You do wonder as well.
Brianna Jai.
Yeah, you do wonder. I look at my kids' generation and I wonder whether they will grow up and have a complete rejection of all of this and they will just say enough because they will think we were all insane for having become so addicted to our phones. I wonder whether, as a generation after generation do, they will reject it. Wayne, blame Western governments for the rise of China. People were saying this 10 years ago and every country ignored it. That is a really good point, Wayne, because we've taken Chinese investment and obviously our houses are full of items we've bought from made in China.
And if you remember as well, we had to get them out of the 5G. Huawei.
We did.
Get them out, literally extricate them
Yeah,
from
that
it.
was at least one thing I think they did quite well.
Yeah.
And Jan says if they've seen the electoral roll, what else have they been looking at? That's the threat to our democracy. They never do things by halves. I'm much more worried about my own government looking at what I do online, to be fair.
The point is, though, go back, we said before, the electoral roll is a public document which you can access if you go to your library.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 8th of April.
As a nationwide manhunt continues, GB News can confirm the prime suspect in the horrific murder of a young mother in Bradford entered the United Kingdom on a student visa.
Payday. Millions of pensioners will see a rise of £900 in their state pension from today as the benefit is raised by 8.5%. That's more than double the rate of inflation. Do you feel better off?
And there's growing pressure on Angela Rayner as more questions are asked about her tax affairs. A senior Labour MP, a shadow cabinet minister nonetheless, has defended her by saying many families live in two homes.
Right, state pensions, inflation-busting rise in those. Do you feel better off? Are you happy with it? 8.5%. Are you one of those who is going to be paying a little more income tax than you're used to?
Because, of course, the income tax threshold applies to pensions, as Liam Halligan was explaining in the last hour. If you get more than £12,500 in pensions, you don't pay, of course, into your pension as you put in, but you do pay as you take out. Now, obviously, no one who only receives the basic state pension will be paying any tax, but there are other pensions that you can get on top of that or instead of that that will, of course, be subject to tax.
And a lot of young people say that the triple lock has to go. It's not fair. It's not fair. It's just a benefit for pensioners, and they point to the wealthy pensioners out there that don't deserve this extra cash. 8.5% boost, 10.1% last time, wasn't it?
There is a question. There is a question on how sustainable this is going forward. If the state pension grows by 8.5% or similar huge numbers each year, but the economy is only growing by 0.1%, eventually, if you follow that graph, the sums don't add up. You need to grow the economy in order to fund things like this. So it really has to come in concert with some economy-growing measures.
Let us know what you think. Could you see a time where the pension triple lock is no more? gbnews.com/your say. Have your say today. But let's get the news headlines.
Tom and Emily, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. It's just after 1 o'clock. The top stories. The Labour leader says that the NHS is on its knees and has promised to modernise the health service if his party wins the next election. It's hoped that a plan to digitise children's health records, known as the Red Book, will boost vaccination rates and improve access to healthcare. It would also see parents receive automatic reminders for notifications and appointments on health information via the NHS app. Sir Keir Starmer says the plan will bring the NHS into the future.
Everybody has that Red Book knows that it can get lost, it can get forgotten, all the details have to be re-entered, it wastes a huge amount of time, and this is an example of the sort of reform that we want in the NHS. Obviously, everybody will know the NHS is absolutely on its knees. If we're elected into government, if we're privileged enough to come into government, we'll have to pick the NHS up, put it on its feet, but we also need to make it fit for the future, and that's where the reform comes in.
Well, as Tom and Emily mentioned at the top of the hour, we now know that the prime suspect in the murder of a woman in Bradford came to Britain on a student visa. West Yorkshire Police have released this photo of 25-year-old Habibur Masoom from the Oldham area. He's described as an Asian man of a slim build. He was seen wearing a jacket with grey, white and black stripes. You can see that footage there if you're watching on television. The victim was known to him and was attacked on a main shopping street while pushing her baby in a pram. Despite efforts from an off-duty doctor and passers-by, she did die from her injuries later in hospital. The 25-year-old, a digital marketing student at the University of Bedfordshire, is still at large, with police warning he could still be armed, and they're also warning people not to approach the suspect and urging anyone with information to contact police. A new poll has found that 74% of British Muslims would not object if abortion were outlawed. A survey of 1,000 British Muslims carried out by JL Partners also found that just 28% would object if homosexuality was banned. Homosexuality was decriminalised in 1967, which is currently supported by 62% of the general public. The research was commissioned by the Henry Jackson Society, which says the results reveal attitudes among British Muslims are very different from the bulk of the British population. Millions of senior citizens will feel the benefits of an 8.5% pension boost today, worth up to £900 for those claiming the full amount. It means last year's rate of £10,600 will rise to £11,500. However, the Liberal Democrats say so-called stealth taxes will wipe out over 3/4 of that increase as more pensioners are dragged into paying income tax. NHS staff, including paramedics and nurses, have been shown pornographic images, offered money for sex and assaulted at work. That's according to new research. A study of more than 12,000 health workers reveals widespread incidents of sexual harassment, with 1 in 10 saying it's something they have experienced in the workplace. Of those, almost a third reported sexual assault. In response to those findings by Unison, the government says NHS organisations have a responsibility to protect their staff and their patients. The Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, has denied claims that the government is failing to prepare for war. Two former defence ministers say Britain isn't ready for conflict and suggest some ministers are just hoping that threats will go away. James Heappey and Ben Wallace cited examples of allies like Sweden, where the public are given war preparation guidance, including a booklet explaining what to do in a time of war. The intervention from those two long-serving ministers comes as Rishi Sunak faces pressure to increase defence spending. Well, former head of the British Army, Lord Richard Dannett, told GB News this morning that it makes sense for all of us to prepare for conflict.
Looking at the situation in Europe, the security situation in Europe, with Russia's aggression against Ukraine being the predominant factor at the present moment, it makes sense for a country like ourselves to think about the worst, to prepare for the worst, to make sure that we're in a good place if the worst should happen.
And finally, the Prime Minister has denied that the Foreign Office is elitist and dismissed suggestions it should remove colonial-era paintings. It comes after a new report from a group of former diplomats said the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office is anchored in the past and should be replaced by a new department, with, they say, fewer colonial-era paintings on the wall. Well, in a Downing Street statement, the Foreign Office said that it was doing vital work and should be proud of Britain's history. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. More in half an hour. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan that code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, it's 1:07 and a nationwide manhunt is underway for a 25-year-old suspected of stabbing a young mother in Bradford, pushing her baby in a pram in broad daylight.
It's a really shocking case, this. Well, it's been confirmed now by GB News that Habibur Masoom entered the UK on a student visa to study a master's degree at the University of Bedfordshire.
Well, every police force up and down the country is searching for Masoom, and he is believed to have links to the Burnley and Chester areas.
Oh, joining us from the scene of the crime in Bradford is our reporter Anna Riley. Anna, just break down exactly what took place here on the High Street.
Yes, well, it happened here on Saturday afternoon around 3:20. It's the Westgate area of Bradford, very close to the city centre. It's an area lined with shops, and it's also a residential area as well. There's a number of flats around here. In terms of what happened, a 27-year-old woman was pushing a pram with her baby in the pram, and as that was happening, she was approached and stabbed fatally in the neck. We've heard that there's a nationwide manhunt that is continuing, as you've mentioned, that search for Habib Mashour, a 25-year-old man, as we've heard, who came over to the UK on a student visa. We've heard that just days ago, the suspected attacker shared a video on his YouTube channel vlogging his trip from Manchester to Barcelona. He captured his trip from the moment he boarded the flight, landing in the Spanish city, before encouraging his 14 subscribers to continue following for upcoming videos. He's also shared his clips to 4,300 followers on Facebook, telling them how to prepare a hospital bag for your newborn baby. Another video showed him setting up a child's cot. He shares travel vlogs of his adventures and life in the UK, and online, as part of this, he presents an image of himself as an enthusiastic traveller who enjoys discovering new cultures. Another post online shows him admiring the wide range of Bangladeshi-made clothes in Primark before trying on a range of winter jumpers. He then films a display showing children's clothes on offer and leaves with 2 full bags. In another video from January, he's seen filming himself walking through a housing estate as snow falls, and warns his followers who are new to the UK not to stay out in the cold too long, as they could get chest problems. As you've said, police all over the country are searching for him. Police are saying if you do sight him, do not approach him. They do not know if he still may be armed, but report any sightings to 999. Now, earlier we spoke to Gio Khan. He is a shopkeeper, and he helped the victim in her time of need. This is what he had to say.
So when I looked, she was lying down, and the head was down, and then all I see at the back, and the baby was, the pram was there, and then I tried to check her nerves, pulse, and you know, she wasn't there, the pulse. Then within a few minutes, Asian doctor come, and he goes, look, I am a doctor, and let me check her. And he had his bag with him, and he started checking her. And what we did, we turned her over, and the blood was all over, on the floor, on her body. And then there was a stabbing marks, well, not marks, but wound on the neck. It was disgusting. Actually, I couldn't take it in, but I tried my best to, you know, I mean, calm myself down.
So a truly shocking account there from Mr. Khan, the shopkeeper, of what he witnessed on Saturday afternoon. Now, the last images on CCTV show Mashour that he was wearing a coat with 3 different colours, and he was in a light grey or blue tracksuit bottoms. He's described, as you can see in pictures, as of slim build and of Asian descent. So anybody that sees him are warned to stay away, but instantly report any sightings to police on 999 as this manhunt continues.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Riley, for bringing us that. You're in Bradford. Thanks very much. Very interesting to see how he wished to, this chief suspect here, wished to project himself on his social media. So blog posts about living in the UK and travelling and setting up a baby's cot.
Yes.
And then to go on to commit such a heinous crime like this, if he is found to have done so. Shocking.
Very, very shocking. Absolutely. Thank you so much to Anna for bringing us all of that. Now, in political news, the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy has defended his party's deputy leader over her controversial ownership and indeed sale of a former council house.
Yes, this comes as fresh reports allege that Angela Rayner did not provide all the correct information surrounding her taxes, with pictures and social media posts suggesting she had a second home and was actually living at her ex-husband's house with her children.
Well, now Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is insisting this is all just a Tory scheme to distract voters.
Angela Rayner's been asked no end of questions about this. She's answered them all. She said she's very happy to answer any further questions from the police or from any of the authorities. I don't need to see the legal advice. My team has seen it. But I will say this, that on the day that the A&E figures, people waiting more than 24 hours in A&E, we now know that they are 10 times as high as they were 5 years ago. The idea that the Tories want to be focusing on what Angela Rayner, how much time she spent with her ex-husband 10 years ago, I can tell you here, at this hospital, nobody is interested in that. They're very, very interested in what are you going to do about the A&E problem caused by this government.
Well, this is, of course, after David Lammy, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, went on a broadcast round yesterday where he said that perhaps Angela Rayner is only being targeted here because she's a northern woman. Well, is that precisely the case? Let's discuss this all now with Novara Media's Aaron Bastani. Aaron, it does seem that there is a case to answer here, and at the very least it seems very odd that Sir Keir Starmer, a man who presents himself as the most forensic lawyer in the world, that he hasn't asked to see any of the evidence or the advice here.
Well, I think it's quite instructive, Tom, that he said he hadn't seen it. I think that's a caveat for any eventualities in the future. Look, it's not a huge deal. It's not as important as, the NHS falling apart, but clearly we don't have a public sector, we don't have public services without taxes. Clearly, politicians, public figures should be setting the tone. And I think, look, it shouldn't be the end of the world for Angela Rayner if she does have to pay some back. It shouldn't be the end of her political career. She shouldn't get fired. But it should be possible to say, look, these things can be quite complicated. It was a long time ago. I think she'll probably have to pay capital gains of something maybe like £10,000. That's the ballpark region. It's not something that's implausible. She could come to some kind of agreement with HMRC, pay that over 5 years. It's really not that outlandish. I mean, that to me would be a sensible way to resolve this. I find Starmer's response strange, but also, like I say, telling. He's given himself a little bit of a get out of jail card if you were paying attention.
Yes, I think it does appear so. He can sort of... He can say, if it does come to pass that Angela Rayner is found to have committed some kind of crime in this or not done things by the books according to HMRC, he can say, well, I didn't see the tax advice, so I didn't know for sure either way, so he can cover his back, I guess.
I think that's entirely right. It's also strange for him to say that would this be a police matter? This is the guy who was the head of the CPS, he was the most senior lawyer in the country, the director of public prosecutions. I presume it would be an issue for HMRC, and I don't see what criminal law she would have broken. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some sort of deception that's gone on, but I can only presume
there is a question with regard to electoral law and which was her primary residence with regard to declarations that had been made when she was standing for election. So that could be the case, but obviously that doesn't involve cash, and that would be a more minor situation. But I suppose that could be the criminal element here.
Well, maybe, but I think... I don't know, but I think the home that she was, apparently in, which is not this one, was still in the same constituency. You could put it down to an oversight, a complex family situation. Again, I think there should be a way for Rayner, if that is bound to be the case, to be able to walk it back.
But Aaron, this reminds me a little bit of something that seemed perhaps not that large to a number of people, which is, did someone have a birthday cake or did they not have a birthday cake while the same number of people were sitting around a table indoors together? Was it a piece of paper or a piece of cake on the table?
Oh, but that was Boris Johnson.
That seemed relatively trivial. But of course, what made that grow and engorge and become all dominant as a political story perhaps wasn't so much about the act of that one day, that one afternoon, but how it was responded to. And some might say how various things were said that then were changed and the story just escaped the principal actors. Could it be the case that the cover-up in this instance, if there is one, could be worse than the crime?
Look, I don't know. The thing is, with politicians, if something can be put down to incompetence rather than mendacity, it's generally the case. And I think, by the way, that was also the case with Boris Johnson. I don't think this should be some sort of career ender for Angela Rayner if it is found to be a problem. And like I say, they aren't huge sums of money, But realistically, tax avoidance, and this is not tax avoidance, this would be something else, but tax avoidance is a massive political issue that Labour have tried to bang the drum on repeatedly, quite rightly in my opinion. You lose a lot of moral credibility and authority on the issue if all of a sudden you say, well, actually, this isn't a particularly big deal. Somebody who earns what? In excess of
people do
£100,000
not like hypocrisy. Aaron, may I just butt in? Because I want to read exactly what the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, had to say on this and get your reaction.
Please.
He said, look, I think there's a different arrangement and expectation for the Prime Minister than there is in this context. We're not yet in government. Why do we land on this northern woman who had an arrangement with her husband, a blended family? Why do we focus on her? Aaron, what do you think he's suggesting there?
Look, I have no time for this. I'm a bit of a rarity on the left. I mean, to be fair, I think many people on the left also have no time for this. David Lammy is a particularly conspicuous example of somebody who tries to mobilise this kind of grievance politics. And also I find it particularly funny, look, when people have attacked GB News with regards to Ofcom complaints and whatnot, David Lammy presents a show on LBC. Angela Rayner has presented shows on LBC. So that double standard is really replete through public life. Quickly on Boris Johnson, and of course Cakegate. At the time, it's bad, and like you say, Tom, it was because of the wider context of people having to put up with so many privations, and that was the stark contrast. But it really is extraordinary to me now what's going on with Lammy, that somehow he thinks that Her Majesty's opposition is allowed to play by a different set of rules. That has not been how David Lammy has played politics. He has always said that, there should be, the application of rules to people regardless of their station, colour or creed. And now he's asking for something quite different. I think, look, if Rayner's done this, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't need to be over-dramatised. Just pay the money back. Let's move on. I'm worried for Labour's own sake. They seem incapable of even countenancing that problem. But let's see.
Seems strange, given that they hired government's biggest fixer, Sue Gray, who's supposed to be incredibly competent in all matters related to sort of fiscal propriety and responsibility and indeed competence. This seems like a relatively incompetent response, no matter how it all plays out in the end. But Aaron Bassani, thank you very much for joining us and talking through what is quite a complicated issue of tax affairs and indeed principal residences.
I must say, a bit of a pathetic defence from David Lammy. Yeah. Oh, you're picking on a northern woman. Classic Tories. I mean, just, reveal the evidence.
It's very, very odd, as if. And the most instructive thing here is that Keir Starmer is saying, "I don't need to see the evidence."
Yeah. Since when does he not want to see the evidence? As you say, Mr. Forensic Starmer, he should be all over this, considering his previous employment as well. But let us know what you make of that. gbnews.com/your say. Very shortly, we're going to be discussing, though, the extraordinary findings that 52% of British Muslims want to make it illegal in this country to show an image of the Prophet Muhammad in this country. Does this show a failure of integration? We're going to be having that debate, so don't go anywhere. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who, at least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the red wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 1:25. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, a poll commissioned by the Henry Jackson Society, which is a counter-extremism think tank, found that 46% of British Muslims said they sympathise with Hamas.
The poll also found a huge divide between British Muslims and the general public over social issues such as homosexuality and the traditional role in the household of women.
Yes, well, joining us is Director of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle, who thinks the findings are quite worrying, and political commentator Joanna Jarju, who thinks that we need to not overreact to these figures. Well, Peter, the question really is, these findings from this polling of attitudes among British Muslims, do they show that integration has failed?
Well, yes, because the problem is, Emily, with the way you put the question, is that somehow or other, you know, it is sort of up to us to make sure that people integrate. I would say that when people come to this country, it is up to them to make sure that they integrate. And what we're seeing by this poll, you've highlighted some things, but some of the other findings are absolutely shocking. I would add, for example, that the headline finding was that only 1 in 4 British Muslims actually believe that Hamas, for example, carried out murder and rape on October the 7th. I mean, that's not just an opinion, that's a denial of reality. But to go back to the points that you originally highlighted, which was that 52% of Muslims think that we should make it illegal to show pictures of Mohammed. And I would add as well, something like 32% would like Sharia law to be introduced in Britain. Now, what I would say is that, well, there are already something like 80 councils of Sharia already operating in the UK. Why would you come to a country and then want to change its very legal system? I think that what this report, which is shocking but not surprising, shows is that, in fact, attitudes amongst the wider Muslim population are more extreme than maybe many people would like them to be. I use that advisedly because we're always being told that there is a kind of small minority or whatever. But frankly, as Tom mentioned there, on issues like homosexuality, on issues such as in the home, huge divergence.
Yeah. OK, Peter, let's throw that over to Joanna, because it is incontrovertible in this that on many of these questions, it's not a small minority. On some issues, like the wishing to outlaw homosexuality, that's a majority.
Well, Tom, I think that in situations like this, we have to look at it holistically. So we're talking about homosexuality when it comes to the Muslim community. I'm Catholic, and I know that, the Catholic Church has very strong views on homosexuality. So it seems as if when we have these types of conversations, we use the Muslim community as a scapegoat, as the only community that have backward views when it comes to this.
Hang on, Joanna, do a majority of Catholics want to make homosexuality illegal?
Sorry?
Do a majority of Catholics want to make homosexuality illegal in the UK?
I'm not saying that the majority of Catholics do, but what I'm saying is that the Muslim faith is not the only faith that has, quote unquote, backward views when it comes to things like homosexuality. But also, I'm not going to take this one poll and take it as gospel in terms of what the majority of the Muslim faith thinks. I know
there have been other polls, though, haven't there, Peter? Peter, sorry, Joanna, but Peter, there have been other polls that have shown worrying trends.
It's not a trend, actually. Since I've been looking at these polls, basically the numbers stay roughly the same. And actually, what is interesting as well is that one of the great tropes of multiculturalism, which we all meant to believe going way back, was that somehow younger people over a period of time would become less, sort of radical, or should we say they would slightly change their cultural attitudes and beliefs. It's not happening. So when it comes to Hamas or any of these other issues, the younger you get of people polled, the more radical they are.
OK, let's throw that back to Joanna now. Joanna, what do you make of that?
Look, I don't deny that there is a pocket within the Muslim community that are extreme, and I think that that's the same, to be honest, when it comes to all across the board. And when we think of things like this, we also have to consider... Sorry, can I just finish? We also have to consider that since the October 7th attacks, there's also been a 600% increase in Islamophobia. That's not to say that there isn't pockets of the Muslim community that have also been anti-Semitic, but I just think that when we look at how certain groups of society behave, we shouldn't just pick just the Muslim community and say, OK, we've seen this poll and they're the ones that are the problems. There's actually problems across the board. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. So to pretend as if integration hasn't happened just because of them is just disingenuous.
Thanks, Joanna. But Peter, OK, so we've got this polling. I think 1,000 Muslims were polled on this. What do we do with this data?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, we should stop being frightened of being called racist or Islamophobic. We should be able to criticize. We should absolutely, and this is down to the government in the end, it should absolutely lay it on the line that this country has a particular culture. It is nominally Christian, fair enough, but therefore what that means is that we should be able to criticize religion freely. Remember, we've just passed the 3-year anniversary of a teacher up in Batley in Yorkshire who did show a picture of Mohammed to his students, simply as part of the RE class. He's still in hiding, right? His life is being destroyed. So for my friend here to talk about things being just like a pocket, why are we picking on Islam or Muslims, playing the victim card, I would add again. We have got to be absolutely clear of what we are as a country. You've also got to say to people, if you like Sharia law and you want Sharia law to be live under Sharia law, then there are many countries in the world that have Sharia law.
OK, let's throw that back to Joanna.
Look, I'm not saying that people wanting to change the law to Sharia. I'm Catholic, for God's sake. Like, I'm Christian. I don't want to see Sharia law in the UK. I'm not saying that there isn't a pocket that are pushing for that. But what I find really disingenuous is that when we talk about integration as a whole, we will pick one side of society that we think are an easy target and say, well, the UK isn't integrated because of them. The UK isn't integrated because of this particular pocket. When what I'm trying to say is that, especially after the October 7th attacks, which this poll focuses on, you can see that there has been an increase in Islamophobia as well. And that's not Islamophobia of me kind of virtue signaling and saying anybody who criticizes Islam is Islamophobic. I'm talking about actual hate crimes. So to just completely disregard that and not kind of take into account that it comes from both sides and different pockets of society and not integrating with each other. And might I say that some of this Islamophobia, the majority of it has been targeted on Muslim women.
But Joanna, we can't shy away. We can't shy away from looking at this data and thinking about what the consequences of such attitudes could be. But thank you very much. Appreciate both of your input. Sorry, Peter. We'll speak to you again, I'm sure. Peter Whittle and Joanna Jarju. Great stuff. Whoa. Well.
Gosh, I'm sure you have views on that at home. Remember the new address, gbnews.com/your say, to get involved in the discussion.
Nailed it, Tom.
There we go.
Nailed it. Thank you very much. Yes. Keep your views coming in. I've just actually messaged. In the break, I had a little message inviting everyone to continue writing to us. Posting to us.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. gbnews.com/your say. Committed that to memory now. It's marvellous. Now, we'll be discussing the total solar eclipse that will be sweeping perhaps the most populated areas in recent history that any eclipse has. So if you're in North America, or even Liverpool, or Cornwall, or Glasgow, you might be a little bit excited. But first, let's get your latest headlines.
Got him excited.
Tom and Emily, thanks very much. Just after 1:30, and the top story from the newsroom this hour. The prime suspect in the murder of a woman in Bradford came to Britain on a student visa. West Yorkshire Police have released these photos, you can see here if you're watching on television, of Habibur Masoom from the Oldham area. He's described as an Asian man of slim build. He was last seen wearing a jacket with grey, white and black stripes. The victim was attacked on a main shopping street while she pushed her baby in a pram. And despite efforts from an off-duty doctor and passers-by, she later died from her injuries in hospital. The 25-year-old suspect, a digital marketing student at the University of Bedfordshire, is still at large. Police are warning he could still be armed and are warning people not to approach the suspect. They're asking anyone with information to contact police on 999. One of two 12-year-old boys charged with murdering a man on playing fields in Wolverhampton has admitted possessing a machete at the scene. The victim, 19-year-old Sean Sisahai, was found stabbed to death last November. The two children, who can't be named because of their age, have both pleaded not guilty to murder, and they will now face a trial of up to 4 weeks, currently set to start on the 29th of April. The Labour leader says the NHS is on its knees and has promised to modernise the health service if the party wins the next election. It's hoped that a plan to digitise children's health records, known as the Red Book, will boost vaccination rates and improve access to healthcare. It would also see parents receive automatic notifications for appointments and health information via the NHS app. And millions of senior citizens are set to feel the benefits of an 8.5% pension boost from today. That's worth up to £900 for those claiming the full amount. It means last year's rate of £10,600 will rise to £11,500. That's the latest from the newsroom. More at 2 o'clock. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan that code there on your screen. Or if you're listening on radio, go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2619 and €1.1658. The price of gold is currently £1,843.41 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,927 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, very good day to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It is going to turn wet and windy for many of us in association with an area of low pressure which has been named Storm Pierrick by Meteo France. Nonetheless, it is going to bring some pretty unsettled weather to many parts of the UK. For the time being, though, some decent sunshine across northern parts of Scotland and eastern England. Here, actually feeling pretty warm in the sunny spells, with temperatures here getting into the high teens. Elsewhere, though, turning cooler and a little bit more unsettled because of the wind and the rain that's pushing its way in association with that feature that I highlighted earlier. So temperatures for many staying in the low to mid-teens. As we go later on then, most places are likely to see some outbreaks of rain. Watch out for some heavy thundery downpours affecting the southeast as we go through this evening. And even elsewhere, the rain could be pretty heavy and persistent, especially across parts of Scotland where we do have a warning in force. And elsewhere, watch out for those strong blustery winds with gusts of around 50 to 60 miles per hour, perhaps a bit stronger than that. Because of all the unsettled weather, a mild start to Tuesday morning, but a relatively wet and windy one for many of us. The rain gradually making its way north and eastwards as we go through the day could bring something a little bit wintry over the higher ground. So something a bit dry developing, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, central southern England and Wales, perhaps even a bit of sunshine breaking out. But notice our temperatures will be down a few degrees compared to today, with highs just about into double figures.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to North Yorkshire firstly and the southbound A1M. Now, emergency repairs are ongoing between Scotch Corner Junction 53 and Catterick. At Junction 52, there's a lane closure in place. Long Bennington in Lincolnshire, the northbound A1 from the Cottam turn-off through towards the Claypole turn-off. It's part blocked and queuing. There's been a three-vehicle collision there, so that's being dealt with at the moment and it's causing delays. The earlier bump on the northbound M1 around the Northampton turn-off at 15 has cleared. It's still looking a little bit slow, but all the lanes are back open. And in Carmarthenshire in southwest Wales towards Carmarthen, the eastbound A40 closed and queuing. There's been a collision just heading through towards the Llanllwch turn-off at the moment. And for now, that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up. It's just gone 20 to 2. That's a pleasing, alliterative time.
1:40.
20 to 2.
1:40.
There we go. That's the friendly yet banterous debate we have here on GB News on Good Afternoon Britain. Now, we're getting to your views because we've got a brand new comment section on the website. It's very exciting. gbnews.com/yoursay. It's not just a conversation between us and you, but also to everyone, between everyone watching the show as well. And it's great to see those comment threads developing.
Be nice to each other.
Absolutely.
No fisticuffs.
But on pensions, and we've been talking about that record increase in pensions that is going into people's pay packets from today. Ian says, pensions may have gone up, but don't forget that council tax has also increased. So yes, it's true to say that the pension increase is more than inflation, but there are other things that eat into that increase. Which Ian points to.
Andrew says, he's just written on the Your Say, he says this report on Muslims wanting Sharia law, some Muslims, should be a concern for anyone who lives in the UK. This is the UK, not the UAE, he says. This is proof that people do not integrate. And also on pensions, William says, why is the new full state pension nearly half of the age 21 or over national living wage of £11.44 per hour, even though 35 years of national insurance has been paid into by pensioners who are increasingly being targeted for more tax and being accused of being greedy? Yes, I would agree with you that sometimes the narrative around older people and pensioners can get a little bit aggressive.
Now, Ray has said that Britain is a nation founded on Christianity and should remain so. That was pointing to their poll of British Muslims. But interestingly, that poll asked the question, should we disestablish the Church of England? And I found the result a little bit strange. Perhaps people can have their own theories on this. The British Muslim population was less in favour of disestablishing the Church of England than the British population as a whole.
That is very interesting. I wonder, I mean, I've got various theories.
I mean, I think you probably want to disestablish the Church of England. I think Justin Welby's doing his bit to disestablish the Church of England,
No, I absolutely do not want to do that. I absolutely do not.
You're an anti-disestablishmentarian.
On Angela Rayner, he wanted to use that word.
I did.
On Angela Rayner, Rich says, Starmer claiming nobody is interested in seeing Rayner's evidence. I am. Since she's about to be part of the next government, she should be under scrutiny. She calls for others to resign if they have a questionable background. And that is the truth, isn't it? People don't like hypocrisy. Why is she shying away from just revealing the evidence? If she's done nothing wrong, Just show.
And Jack agrees. He says, I don't like her hypocrisy, but there are much more pressing things to challenge Labour on, such as how they'll pay for their new net zero policies and challenge them on the massive subsidies to renewable companies, most of which are foreign-owned. Jack wants a focus on policy rather than personality.
Yes, and we do often focus on personality, don't we, as the British press?
But isn't it important to think about what would this be like if it were a minister in the Conservative government and they were saying that you've potentially avoided capital gains tax on the sale of a second property that you have improperly registered? I can only imagine this would be a bigger story were it about someone in government versus someone in opposition.
Absolutely, it'd be wall-to-wall coverage, as you mentioned earlier. You know, harks back to the Boris Johnson Partygate, Kategate.
Yes, I still don't understand how Keir Starmer could have a beer as part of a work meeting and that be allowed and he'd get away with saying I had a beer at work, but Boris Johnson couldn't have a cake at work. I just don't get it.
It does seem to me that the mainstream media narrative around this Angela Rayner story is no one cares. No fuss should be made of this. Don't draw attention to it. It's not a big deal. Well, let's see if it's a big deal. Let's see the evidence.
I have a feeling like we might come back to this story.
I think we might.
Well, in other news, the killers of 23-year-old Cody Fisher will be sentenced today. The semi-professional footballer was murdered in a nightclub on Boxing Day back in 2022.
Yes, a jury at Birmingham Crown Court found the 23-year-old Remy Gordon and 22-year-old Cammy Carpenter guilty of his murder. Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has the story for us.
This is the moment Remy Gordon was arrested by police just 2 days after murdering 23-year-old Cody Fisher in a nightclub in Birmingham. Fisher was a talented footballer, having played for Stratford Town and Bromsgrove Sporting, and was enjoying a night out on Boxing Day in 2022 when he was fatally stabbed in the chest. His murderers Remy Gordon and Cammy Carpenter killed Cody in a pre-planned act of revenge on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub in Digbeth, Birmingham. 2 days before his death, Cody Fisher was out with friends on Christmas Eve in a different nightclub when he accidentally bumped into Gordon's back. This CCTV footage shows the two in conversation. Fisher believed he'd done nothing wrong, but was threatened with violence. After the confrontation, Remy Gordon found a picture of Cody online and asked his friends to help identify him. Seen here messaging a group chat only 45 minutes after the initial incident, Gordon says he's due to shank him up. Cody's simple mistake would turn out to be the catalyst for his murder. Fast forward to Boxing Day and Cody Fisher can be seen in this footage arriving at the Crane nightclub. A few hours later, his murderers Remy Gordon and Cammy Carpenter turn up and smuggle a weapon through security. Gordon had found out from friends in the hours before Cody was going to be there. Just before midnight, CCTV shows violence breaking out. It's at this moment Fisher is fatally stabbed in the chest, with the knife penetrating a valve in his heart. He's later pronounced dead at the scene. West Midlands Police Detective Inspector Michelle Thurgood led the investigation.
Getting a call to say somebody's been murdered in a nightclub in the dark that has over 2,000 people is a challenge in itself. However, with the assistance of CCTV and then from the appeal that we put out to the public, we were able in the preceding days to piece together who are potential suspects, and then particularly in terms of the suspects with absolute minutiae detail, watch and re-watch the CCTV, which was a process that took months, not days.
Alongside Gordon and Carpenter, the jury cleared 19-year-old friend of Gordon's, Regan Anderson, of murder and manslaughter, but found him guilty of affray.
We'll have all been that person that's either been pushed or pushed somebody in a crowded premise, and normally it might be through crosswords, it might be an apology, and that's the end of it. But I guess we'll never understand why Remy Gordon took such an affront to this that led to the events of Boxing Day.
In a tribute by Cody's mum, Tracy Fisher, she said he was brave, fearless and the most genuine soul she knew, adding it was a pleasure and honour to call him my son. Jack Carson, GB News.
Well, thanks to Jack for that report. We'll be learning the sentencing a little bit later this afternoon.
Yes, but still to come, it's a total eclipse of the
sun. See, I knew the story that was coming. But I know you like that song.
But it's a very exciting eclipse, isn't it?
It is. It's going to be a total eclipse for a huge number of people. And what's really interesting is to look at where hotels have been booked out across the United States. But we're going to get a glimpse in the United Kingdom, in lots of parts of the west of the UK as well. We'll get much more on that after this.
It's unlucky if you're in the east.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Danny, there's an irony here, isn't there? And that is this. On the one hand, the BBC expect older viewers to cough up more, and yet every opinion poll in the land shows us, Danny, that older people are the least satisfied with the service they get.
Well, the BBC don't give a damn about older people because, as I discovered when I was binned for being 50 and white from the BBC in the Midlands to diversify the lineup, they're after a younger audience because the longevity of the institution, that's the BBC, Martin, relies on the next generation of licence fee payers. And this is quite important, and it's a great point that you've raised. Anybody who's over the age of 50, certainly 60, the BBC doesn't care about you because they're interested in attracting the next generation of licence fee payers. And when those 25-year-olds that they're after at the moment become 40 and 45, they'll stop caring about them too. Otherwise, the BBC just won't exist. It relies on new blood, if you like, when it comes to the licence fee. So that's a great point. They just don't care about middle-aged people.
And yet, they're now floating the idea of older people paying more. How would that work? Would it be means tested?
I know if ever you wanted to satisfy your curiosity that the BBC had a socialist agenda, it's the fact that they want the proletariat to pay more, to not pay, and the bourgeoisie to pick up the bill. This is classic Marxism for you. I know we're treating this lightly, Martin, but how would they means test you? Are you going to have to provide evidence of your bank account? And of course, people's financial situation, they change. You know, people's finances are fluid. So one year you may be what they class as wealthy, and then the next year you're not. So it's a situation that I find just impossible. How it's going to work, I just don't know. It's something that I just don't feel happy about.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, millions of people are preparing for a total solar eclipse in North America later today, but I think you're going to be able to see it if you happen to be on the west of this country. Joining us now is the space expert Andy Lound. Andy, please explain how big of a deal this is.
This is a very big deal. Thank you for having me again, because this is quite exciting. The fact the eclipse is crossing a huge populated area of the United States and into Canada means that more people than ever before, by just being on the ground, are going to be able to see it. America is easily accessible, so there's going to be millions of people traveling to actually get there. There could be well over 100 million people might get an opportunity to actually observe this eclipse. Apart from that, because scientists want to study the eclipse in serious detail, normally you have to travel to vast destinations, but the eclipse is actually going to cross over areas where scientists and establishments are very local, so they're going to be able to get access to it much more easily, which means a lot more science than ever before is going to be done.
And Andy, it is fascinating to see just how much interest there is in this. Here's a little video that we've got of bookings on Airbnb, the app where you can book a hotel. Now, look at how this happens. We're on the 4th of April, 5th of April, 6th. Oh, you can see that line, that orange line there.
Yeah.
That's the curve of the shadow of the eclipse. Clearly, many thousands of people booking hotels to be in that flight path.
On that orange line.
Yeah, isn't that fantastic? What a great graphic, though. There's a graphic that alone can show you where the line of totality is, which is absolutely fabulous. But yeah, it's quite obsessive. You've got the astronomers amateur astronomers, professional astronomers who are eclipse chasers, who chase around the world looking at these things. And when you've observed a total eclipse, trust me, you want to keep doing it because it's such a spectacular... although you do it for, even I did it for science reasons, you actually get very emotional by doing it because of what actually is happening. And that's really important. So yes, you've got it also becomes very much a communal event. Everybody joins in. And when the biggest science eclipse I was involved in was in Libya in 2006, working with the British Council, with the Libyan government, Polish and British scientists, and the whole community just got wrapped up in it together. It was a very unifying thing as a human species, and that's what the eclipse can do for you.
But very quickly, where in the UK will we be able to get a slight glimpse of this?
Yes, you'll be able to get a possibility of seeing the very end of it as the sun is setting. You'll be able to see the partial eclipse. It's probably after 9 o'clock. And with the main areas, Aberdeen, Cardiff, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Leeds, Liverpool and Manchester. So obviously North Wales as well. If you're in the North Wales area, you will be able to watch the sun if you can get a good access, because it should be low in the sky by then. And I think the maximum is about just over 40% of the sun. So you'll see just a little curve of the moon, almost if the sun's had a bite taking out of it. So there is an opportunity, weather permitting, of course.
Very exciting indeed. Thanks so much, Andy Lound, space expert. I'm excited. I wish I could see it now. I should have gone off to the States.
Get a trip off to Belfast even, or Liverpool or Glasgow. Or, I
mean, these eclipse chasers, I can't imagine it's very emotional. People say it feels like the end of the world for a short time. But coming up, we're going to have the very latest in the manhunt for the 25-year-old suspected of stabbing a young mother in Bradford.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Most of us will see some wet and windy weather as we go through the next 24 hours or so, in association with a feature that has been named by the French Met Service, Storm Pierrick, but it is going to bring some unsettled weather to many of us. Watch out for some heavy thundery downpours across parts of the southeast as we go through this evening. Otherwise, it's strong winds across southern and western coastal parts that could cause a bit of a problem, and then some heavy persistent rain pushing its way across parts of northern England and into Scotland as we go through tonight and into the early hours of tomorrow. Because of the cloudy, wet and windy weather, temperatures really aren't going to drop much for many of us. So a mild start tomorrow, but a pretty unsettled one too. Heavy persistent rain continuing across parts of Scotland. Could be some winteriness over the higher ground here. Otherwise, some outbreaks of rain for parts of northern England and into Wales, and a few showery spots elsewhere too, but something a bit drier, perhaps even a bit brighter across parts of Northern Ireland, Western Wales and southwest England as we go through the afternoon. Temperatures will be down several degrees compared to today, highs of around 13, possibly 14 Celsius at best. After a bit of a chilly start on Wednesday morning, it is going to turn wet and windy again from the west as some wet weather pushes its way in association with another system that's going to push its way through later on in the week, and there should be something of a drier trend across southern parts at least, and temperatures rising too with highs in the low 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then, we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 8th of April.
Now, as a nationwide manhunt continues, GB News can confirm that the prime suspect in the horrific murder of a young mother in Bradford entered the UK on a student visa.
Payday! Millions of pensioners will see a rise of £900 in their state pension from today, as the benefit is raised by a whopping 8.5%. But there's a catch, and we'll have the details of that.
And Scotland's new hate crime law, police say they cannot cope after receiving thousands of complaints in just the first week. It sparked fears other crimes won't be investigated properly. Well, you've got senior officers essentially warning in Scotland that because of the deluge of hate crime complaints, they're not going to be able to properly investigate other crimes, or at least they'll have to cut back. We've already got police officers being paid to go on overtime just to trawl through all of these various investigations that they have to do.
It is the most extraordinarily cack-handed implementation of a law that I think people have seen for a very, very long time. So much so, there's been a new poll out of people in Scotland. Twice as many people want to see this new law repealed as were in favour of its implementation. It's quite an extraordinary situation there, and it could be quite damaging for the SNP's electoral prospects in the upcoming election.
Yes, do you think this is an absolute own goal from Humza Yousaf? I mean, they packaged this law as being progressive, how it's all about tolerance, how it's going to make Scotland a better place to live, that, you know, inciting hatred, stirring up hatred will be long gone in Scotland.
By all their new informant centres that they've set up.
It's crazy. And now the police are saying, the people who actually have to deal with these complaints, who actually have to enforce the law, they're saying, hang on, how on earth are we going to manage this? Thousands and thousands of complaints, the majority of which probably are spurious.
But all of which have to be investigated. How much police time is this going to use up? What should they be doing instead? Please do get involved in the conversation. gbnews.com/yoursay. That's the new address where we can all get involved in the conversation and interact with each other. It's great fun.
Yes, I mean, Gary's just said Scotland's become a joke. So there you go. Instant feedback. Get in touch after your headlines.
Tom and Emily, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you from the newsroom. 2 o'clock, and we start with some breaking news out of Lincoln this afternoon, where a 28-year-old man has been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife. In March last year, Nicholas Metzen stabbed 26-year-old Holly Bramley at least 4 times before cutting her body into over 200 pieces, which he then stored in their shared flat's kitchen. Lincoln Crown Court heard that he attempted to conceal that crime by buying cleaning supplies and paying his school friend £50 to help dump his wife's body parts in a nearby river. Holly Bramley's remains were discovered in that river over a week later by a passerby. In other news today, the Labour leader says that the NHS is on its knees and has promised to modernise the health service if the party wins the next election. It's hoped that a plan to digitise children's health records, known as the Red Book, will boost vaccination rates and improve access to healthcare. It would also see parents receive automatic reminders for appointments and health information via the NHS app. Sir Keir Starmer says the plan will bring the NHS into the future.
Everybody has that Red Book knows that it can get lost, it can get forgotten, all the details have to be re-entered, it wastes a huge amount of time. And this is an example of the sort of reform that we want in the NHS. Obviously, everybody will know the NHS is absolutely on its knees. If we're elected into government, if we're privileged enough to come into government, we'll have to pick the NHS up, put it on its feet, but we also need to make it fit for the future, and that's where the reform comes in.
Well, as we've been hearing throughout the course of this afternoon, the prime suspect in the murder of a woman in Bradford came to Britain on a student visa. West Yorkshire Police have released this photo here, if you're watching on television, of the 25-year-old suspect, Habibur Massam, from the Oldham area. He's described as an Asian man of slim build, was last seen wearing a jacket with grey, white and black stripes. The victim, known to Massam, was attacked on a main shopping street while pushing her baby in a pram. Despite efforts from an off-duty doctor and passers-by, she did later die from her injuries in hospital. The 25-year-old, a digital marketing student at the University of Bedfordshire, is still at large. The police are warning that he could also still be armed, and they're warning people not to approach, and they're asking anyone with information to contact police on 999. A new poll has found that 74% of British Muslims would not object if abortion were outlawed. A survey of 1,000 British Muslims carried out by JL Partners also found that just 28% would object if homosexuality was banned. Homosexuality was decriminalised in 1967, which is currently supported by 62% of the general public. The research commissioned by the Henry Jackson Society says that the results reveal attitudes are very different from the bulk of the British population. The Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, has denied claims that the government is failing to prepare for war. 2 former defence ministers say Britain isn't ready for conflict, suggesting the government are just hoping that threats will go away. James Heappey and Ben Wallace cited examples of allies like Sweden, where the public are given war preparation guidance, including a booklet explaining what to do in a time of war. Former head of the British Army, Lord Richard Dannett, told GB News this morning that it makes sense for all of us to prepare for conflict.
Looking at the situation in Europe, the security situation in Europe, with Russia's aggression against Ukraine being the predominant factor at the present moment, it makes sense for a country like ourselves to think about the worst, to prepare for the worst, to make sure that we're in a good place if the worst should happen.
The Prime Minister has dismissed suggestions that the Foreign Office is elitist and outdated after a group of former diplomats called for a rebrand. In a report titled The World in 2040, the former officials said the Foreign Office is anchored in the past and should be moved from Westminster to somewhere with fewer colonial-era paintings on the wall. But in a statement today, Downing Street said the department is doing vital work and that Britain should be proud of its future. And Harold Bishop is returning to Neighbours 15 years after his emotional farewell to the long-running soap opera. At the age of 85, actor Ian Smith is now the series' longest-serving actor. His return comes after his first departure in 1991, when his character Harold was dramatically swept out to sea. He later returned after it was discovered that he'd actually been picked up by a passing ship and had spent years living with amnesia in Tasmania as a Salvation Army worker named Ted. The circumstances of his latest comeback, well, remain unknown. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. More in half an hour. Until then, you can, of course, sign up for GB News alerts. Just scan the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. For now, though, it's back to Tom and Emily.
Right, it's 2:08. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, a nationwide manhunt is underway for a 25-year-old suspected of stabbing a young mother in Bradford who was pushing her baby in a pram, and this all happened in broad daylight.
Yes, it's now been confirmed that Habib Massoum entered the UK on a student visa to study a master's degree at the University of Bedfordshire.
Well, every police force up and down the country is searching for Massoum, and he is believed to have links to the Burnley and Chester areas.
Let's go live now to Bradford, the scene of the crime, where our reporter Anna Riley is for us. And Anna, what happened where you're stood?
Yes, well, it was here on Saturday afternoon, as you say, in broad daylight at 3:20, just near the shop behind us, the Westgate International Food Store, that a 27-year-old woman was pushing her baby in the pram, and she fatally had stab wounds. She was stabbed by her attacker, and after that, a manhunt was launched for Habib Massoum, a 25-year-old man who was alleged to be the attacker. As you mentioned earlier, that nationwide manhunt is going on. He was last seen in the area wearing a duffel coat with 3 different colours and a grey hoodie. He's described as slim and of Asian build. So police are saying that he may still be armed and not to approach him if there's a sighting, but to call them on 999. Now, we've looked into Habib Massoum's online presence as well, which shows him portraying himself as an enthusiastic traveller who enjoys discovering new cultures as he shares his travel vlogs of life in the UK. Now, just days ago, the suspected attacker shared a video on his YouTube channel vlogging his trip from Manchester to Barcelona. He captured his trip from the moment he boarded his flight to landing in the Spanish city of Barcelona, before encouraging his 14 subscribers to continue following for more upcoming videos. He's also shared clips to his 4,300 followers on Facebook, telling them how to prepare a hospital bag for your newborn baby. In another video, he was seen setting up a child's cot. Another post shows him admiring the wide range of Bangladeshi-made clothes in Primark before trying on a range of winter jumpers. He then films a display showing children's clothes on offer and leaves with 2 full bags. In another video from January, he's seen filming himself walking through a housing estate as the snow falls. In the cold
Problem there, a bit of interference on your microphone, so we're just going to see if we can fix those technical difficulties. But Emily, my goodness, this was someone who saw himself clearly as a bit of an internet star with his 14 subscribers, putting about travel videos and, well, but actually looking at him there in a T-shirt, sort of doing mundane things. He didn't look like someone who was going on to be a monster, to stab someone to death.
Well, it just shows the way you portray yourself online doesn't always reflect what you are as a human being.
It's a very strange case.
Shocking. It's great that Anna Riley did some digging and found those clips there. Very interesting indeed to see him portray himself as an enthusiastic traveller who'd gone from Manchester to Barcelona on a trip, who enjoyed learning about new cultures.
A family man.
A family man, yes. Making a cot there.
Only to then stab a woman in front of her baby on a high street in broad daylight.
Absolutely shocking. Thank goodness the baby was unharmed, but that poor woman who has been stabbed 3:20 in the afternoon in Bradford on a high street, and that shopkeeper who came out, who knew the woman, she was a regular at the shop. And then to find that outside your shop, absolutely, truly shocking stuff. We will bring you, and we'll go back to Anna at some point and bring you the very latest on that. At the moment, the manhunt is very much ongoing.
Now to our other top story today. The state pension rises by 8.5% today, with that triple lock pension commitment kicking in.
Yes, the government says the increase will provide a meaningful difference for those reliant on this pension. Is this right? Well, GB News East Midlands reporter has been speaking to pensioners at Irwash Indoor Bowls Club in Derbyshire. There we go, got it out.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not moaning about it. The wife does, but I don't.
It's not enough for the people, the poor pensioners who's only got the pension coming in. Obviously, it's an help, but they give it you one and take it away with the other.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a good deal. The government have done us credit, I think. The only snag is the people that will put into the tax barrier now. That's the only problem. I think it'll put a lot of people that didn't have to pay tax, having to pay tax in future. So I think that's the only snag.
So that's the question that a lot of people have been asking. The snag is that tax is paid on pensions. But obviously, if you only receive the basic state pension, you don't pay tax. It's those who have other pensions on top of the basic state pension.
But what proportion of pensioners have more than just the state pension?
Oh, most pensioners.
Yes, most. So most will be brought into the income tax or paying more income tax than they used to.
But again, they are getting... So let's say a pensioner is in the fortunate position to be in a higher tax band, say 40%. That means instead of £900, it's what, £450? That's still more money than otherwise they would have had.
Yes. Well, a lot of people will say that our pension, our state pension, isn't adequate. It's not generous enough compared to international comparisons.
Although,
I think some
Emily,
countries in Europe, at least, are far more generous.
I've been looking at this because I think very often we do Britain down by comparing the basic state pension in the UK with other more contributory versions of pensions in other countries. So if you look at the basic state pension equivalent in Italy, that's €6,800 a year. That's a lot less than in the UK. In Spain, €8,600 a year, a lot less than the UK. Even Germany, €9,700 a year. That's less than the UK. In fact, the only major European country that has a higher basic state pension than the UK is France. But their pension scheme is £14 billion a year in deficit.
But since when do you want to compare our economy to that of Italy?
No, you
We're
don't.
a bigger economy.
We are a bigger
economy. So therefore, people might expect, wrongly or rightly, that the pension would be more generous.
Absolutely, but I think it's wrong to say, and it was true a decade ago that our pension was lower. I don't think it's true to say anymore that the UK is lower on the basic state pension measurement than most major European countries.
Well, if you're at home receiving the state pension, do you think it's generous? Are you quite happy? One of the chaps that was
that's not to say it's generous.
One of the chaps who was just interviewed seemed happy. He seemed happy with the uplift. Yeah, quite content. Although he might have just been having a nice day at the Bowls Club, so he might have been, unbothered in general. But keep your views coming in on this. Should we speak to Will Hollis?
Yes, who I believe is still at the Bowls Club, so perfect person to speak to. Will, did it seem that most people were generally fairly chipper about this announcement?
Yes, well, there's an ancient proverb, to find a tree you must go to a forest. To find a pensioner, we've come to Irwash Indoor Bowls Club in Long Eaton, Derbyshire, where the chairman earlier told me that it's around 80% of the club members that are receiving the pension. And on any given day, that's the kind of thing that they might be talking about. But especially on a day when a new rate comes in, depending on if you're on the old original pension or if you're on the new pension, it's between about £13 and £17 extra a week that this new uplift will give. A lot of people were celebrating the security that the triple lock gives. The triple lock, which is either by pensions rising by inflation, by average growth of earnings, or simply 2.5%. In this case, it's 8.5%, the average growth of earnings. Now, while some people are really happy about that, others have raised how they feel despite getting a little bit extra. They feel that taxes are what's really taking it away. And the chairman, a guy called Ray Cowell, has been describing some of the problems that people face and where the pension fits into that.
Well, they're facing obviously the rising cost of living, but car tax, council tax, television licence, all of these things are increasing in price. And if you add all those together, I'm sure you'll find that they're a lot greater than the 8.5% that we're being given, less the 20% tax that most of us are going to pay on it.
And do you think that extra little bit of money will help, and will it help enough for the average pensioner?
It will help, but I don't think it would be enough. I think that they'll see a lessening of their standard of living this coming year.
Well, for most people, they do seem happy to be receiving a little bit more money, but a lot of the people that spoke to me said they do have private pensions, they do have savings, and they do really feel for people that are surviving on the state pension alone.
No, that's a really important point. There are still some who do rely just on the basic state pension, although it is a minority of pensioners now, thank goodness. Will Hollis, thank you very much for joining us there. And I hope you do get a chance to play some bowls at the Bowls Club.
He's probably already been invited.
Yeah.
He'll probably, you know, right now be getting ready, limbering up for a good game.
You've played bowls?
Have I played bowls? In the garden, on a lawn.
Yes.
There you go.
No, absolutely.
But not at an official bowls club.
Oh, I have.
Oh, have you now?
There's a great bowling lawn in Cambridge that I've been to.
Oh, that sounds delightful,
yeah,
Tom. You'll
charming.
have to teach me. Perhaps you'll invite me for a round. Do you call it a round of bowls?
Do you know what? I wish I
Game
could
of bowls?
remember. I should think a game of bowls.
Do you know what I do like? Pétanque.
Oh, I haven't played pétanque.
Yeah, that's the French version, perhaps.
Oh, inferior.
Anyway, let's
Very
stop
inferior.
wittering on, because
Yes.
very shortly we'll be bringing you the latest on the Angela Rayner tax turmoil, with both Sir Keir Starmer and David Lammy coming out to defend the Deputy Labour leader. Is there something they're hiding? This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Is the brand of toothpaste super important here, or is it more about the toothbrush? Because I was told a long time ago by my dentist, electric toothbrush, Pip, that is the way to go.
You're exactly right. I mean, the action of mechanically removing plaque, so using a brush, is much more effective than the brand of toothpaste itself. But in terms of the ingredient in toothpaste that we're looking for, it's something called fluoride. And fluoride is essential to help remineralize and strengthen our teeth. It's really important to use a toothpaste with fluoride. And in terms of brushing, using an electric toothbrush is just much easier. You know, you're brushing your teeth first thing in the morning, last thing at night. You're going to be a bit tired in those times. So using an electric toothbrush, you just hold it against your tooth and gum and it does all the work for you. So it's just much easier in my opinion.
But you have to use your electric toothbrush properly.
You're exactly right. Yeah, there is a technique of actually brushing your teeth, although it sounds really simple. With an electric toothbrush, you have to hold it against the tooth and the gum. Ideally, you want a pressure sensor in that toothbrush so you know exactly when you're pressing too hard. But if you're using a manual toothbrush, you need to move it around and small circular motions. But actually what I see is people who use manual toothbrushes, they tend to over scrub and over brush, which can actually lead to gum recession and your enamel thinning long term.
Sometimes I will get up in the morning and I will have breakfast and then I'll brush my teeth. Is that wrong?
Unfortunately, that's wrong. So the best time to brush your teeth is first thing in the morning, as soon as you wake up. If you're brushing after you eat and after breakfast, you're brushing your teeth in that weakened acidic state. So your teeth are actually under attack and they're much more vulnerable.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, earlier in the show, we were talking about this shocking new polling of attitudes within the British Muslim community. They did a survey of about 1,000 Muslims, a cross-section from across the country.
And we should say, because a lot of times people say that opinion polls, well, they've only asked 1,000 people. This is only what they do is they ask a representative sample of people. So it's 1,000 people that's broken down by a representative group of ages, genders, areas.
Obviously, no survey can be 100% perfect, but they do their best to try and find a representative sample. But some of the things that came out of this, only 1 in 4 British Muslims believe Hamas committed murder and rape on October the 7th. Almost half of British Muslims sympathise with Hamas. 52% want to make it illegal in this country to show an image of the Prophet Muhammad, and only 28% say it would be undesirable for homosexuality to be outlawed in the UK. Now, we've spoken to a few people about this over the course of the show, and we debated whether this shows that integration in this country has failed. Lots of you have been getting in touch. We're going to go to some of your views in a little bit, but just want your reaction on that. How worried should we be that some of these views appear to be so widely held among the British Muslim community?
Absolutely. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. Wendy, for instance, has said, why should we not see the picture of Mohammed? Why not? And that's a very fair question. We are a liberal democratic country. I mean, people might think it's distasteful to show a picture of Mohammed. Some people might not. But why should it be illegal?
And we all know what happened to the teacher at the Batley Grammar School, who's still in hiding because he dared to show a picture of the Prophet Muhammad in an educational religious studies class. But keep your views coming in. We will get to some more in a little bit. But first, let's turn our attention to politics. The Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy has defended his party's deputy leader over her controversial ownership of a council house and its sale.
Well, it says fresh reports allege that Angela Rayner didn't provide all the correct information surrounding her taxes, with pictures and social media posts suggesting that she had a second home and was actually living in her ex-husband's house as her primary residence. Now, this matters because it means that when she sold the other house, it wasn't her primary residence. That's the allegation, which means she would have had to pay tax on it. Tax she didn't pay.
Yes, so David Lammy has come out and he argues this is completely normal, insisting she's done nothing wrong, and even suggesting she was targeted as a northern woman. So there you go.
Well,
a little bit of identity politics, why not?
Let's get some more on this now with GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, this is a story that is not going away. It's been rumbling on for some time, but it's becoming a bit of a problem for Sir Keir Starmer.
Yes, it is, because they keep being asked about it because the information that Angela Rayner has given, that no capital gains tax was due, the question that hasn't been answered is why was that? So we had the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy defending her yesterday, saying basically just pick on a northern woman. Why don't you? That this is a smear campaign designed to distract from Tory chaos. Fast forward a day, we have Sir Keir Starmer trying to talk about the NHS, but being instead asked about Angela Rayner's tax affairs. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
Angela Rayner's been asked no end of questions about this. She's answered them all. She said she's very happy to answer any further questions from the police or from any of the authorities. I don't need to see the legal advice. My team has seen it. But I will say this, that on the day that the A&E figures, people waiting more than 24 hours in A&E, we now know that they are 10 times as high as they were 5 years ago. The idea that the Tories want to be focusing on what Angela Rayner, how much time she spent with her ex-husband 10 years ago, I can tell you here, at this hospital, nobody is interested in that. They're very, very interested in what are you going to do about the A&E problem caused by this government.
And of course, he's right. This is not the top of most people's priorities, is it? But of course, Angela Rayner would go after people on the opposite side of politics if she suspected that they had behaved badly. And she is potentially, expected to be in power fairly soon. Now, David Lammy says different rules apply at the moment, but if Labour get into power and she is Deputy Prime Minister, these are questions that she will be expected to answer. A couple of things from what Sir Keir Starmer said. First of all, he's repeating the line that he doesn't need to see the evidence. His team has seen it. So in some ways, if more information later emerges, he is sort of in the clear. The other thing was that he started off by saying, Angela Rayner has been asked no end of questions about this. She's answered them all. Well, she's been asked no end of questions, but she most certainly has not answered them all. And that is why they are still being asked. Fundamentally, and I'll try and whiz through it, it's a bit complicated, but for people who haven't been following this story, she bought a council house before she got married. Then when she got married, she had a house about a mile away with her then husband. When she went on to sell her house in 2015, she says there was no capital gains tax to pay. Now, she says it was her home. She paid bills there. Neighbours say that basically she didn't live there. Her brother lived there, that she lived at this other house with her husband and children, as you would expect, down the road. So the question is, why was no capital gains tax liable? Now, there can only be one of two reasons. Either she spent so much doing up the property that there was none liable for that reason, in which case just say so, or that she claimed it had been her main home when it sounds like it really wasn't. Now, you can do that. You can opt to say which is your main home, but a married couple can only have one main home. The amounts of money that she potentially might owe may only be about £1,500. Small fry compared to Nadine Zahawi with his £5 million that he had to pay back. But, Angela Rayner is an important political figure. So these questions, I think, will not go away until, when and if, we actually get the answers.
Well, thank you very much indeed for talking us through that. Catherine Forster, political correspondent, very interesting indeed to get the context for all of this. There's been a lot said in the past about how Keir Starmer isn't all that close with Angela Rayner and that he tolerates her.
Do you remember
the benefit of party harmony?
Do you remember the terrible local election results that Labour had in 2021? When the Labour Party not only...
I often think about them.
It was around the time that the Conservatives were having the vaccine boost. They were winning the Hartlepool by-election off the Labour Party. It was almost the peak of Boris Johnson's popularity. Well, after those elections, Keir Starmer tried to demote Angela Rayner. He tried to do a reshuffle of his shadow cabinet, but by the end of the day, I mean, Angela Rayner, say what you want about her, she is a tough cookie.
She's a negotiator.
She stayed in the Commons office with Keir Starmer, battling him back, and ended the day with more jobs than she started. She ended with about 5 or 6 jobs.
Yes, didn't she have a very, very long title?
Incredibly long title. She remained deputy leader of the Labour Party. She was shadow minister for this, that and the other. She held so many portfolios by the end of the day. I mean, say what you want about her, but she definitely got one over on Keir Starmer on that occasion.
Yes, he tried to biff her, but she said absolutely not. I am going to get a promotion, actually. Thank you, Keir Starmer. I'm very important to you and your success, potentially, at the next election. Let us know what you make of this story, though. Do you think it has legs? Do you care about it? For me, it's the element of hypocrisy. Angela Rayner is the first to come out of the traps to start demanding that other people release their tax affairs.
Yeah.
And there's smacks of hypocrisy here. And also Keir Starmer, Mr. Forensic. He hasn't been very forensic about that. Is he trying to cover his backside, essentially?
Extraordinary.
When it comes to this.
Extraordinary that he says, oh, I don't need to see it. I've been assured I don't need to see that. What leader says that? Well, questions to be answered there.
I believe her. Well, yes, let us know. gbnews.com/your say. But coming up, police in Scotland say they simply cannot cope with what's being described as a deluge, well, it is a deluge, of hate crime reports following the introduction of that controversial new law by the SNP in Scotland. We'll have more of that after your latest headlines.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom, just after 2:30, the headlines. And we start with some breaking news coming out of Cardiff this afternoon, where the major crime police team have arrested 3 women on suspicion of murder. That's after a 48-year-old man was killed on Sunday evening. We understand a 28-year-old and 2 43-year-olds, all women, remain in custody as officers are continuing their investigation there, which they say is in its early stages. A police cordon is still in place at that scene, and officers, they say, will be increasing their patrols in the area over the coming days. South Wales Police are now appealing for any witnesses who would have been in the Kirai area of the west of the city between 11 p.m. and midnight last night to come forward with any information. High Street retailer Ted Baker has announced this afternoon it's cutting 245 jobs in the coming weeks. It's also been revealed that an additional 15 stores will be shut, with 11 of those to close next week after the chain went into administration last month. The company remains in the process of finding a new partner to run its retail and online sectors. And the Post Office Minister says people responsible for the Horizon IT scandal should go to jail. Kevin Hollinrake was speaking after meeting dozens of those affected by the scandal, which saw postal workers wrongly jailed due to faulty software. The Horizon inquiry is resuming this week with Alan Bates, who was the focus of an ITV drama, due to give evidence there tomorrow. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. More in the next half hour. You can, until then, sign up for GB News alerts. Just scan the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, very good day to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It is going to turn wet and windy for many of us in association with an area of low pressure which has been named Storm Pierrick by Meteo France. Nonetheless, it is going to bring some pretty unsettled weather to many parts of the UK. For the time being, though, some decent sunshine across northern parts of Scotland and eastern England. Here, actually feeling pretty warm in the sunny spells, with temperatures here getting into the high teens. Elsewhere, though, turning cooler and a little bit more unsettled because of the wind and the rain that's pushing its way in association with that feature that I highlighted earlier. So temperatures for many staying in the low to mid-teens. As we go later on then, most places are likely to see some outbreaks of rain. Watch out for some heavy thundery downpours affecting the southeast as we go through this evening. And even elsewhere, the rain could be pretty heavy and persistent, especially across parts of Scotland where we do have a warning in force. And elsewhere, watch out for those strong blustery winds with gusts of around 50 to 60 miles per hour, perhaps a bit stronger than that. Because of all the unsettled weather, a mild start to Tuesday morning, but a relatively wet and windy one for many of us. The rain gradually making its way north and eastwards as we go through the day could bring something a little bit wintry over the higher ground. So something a bit dry developing, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, central southern England and Wales, perhaps even a bit of sunshine breaking out. But notice our temperatures will be down a few degrees compared to today, with highs just about into double figures.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Eastbound M62 then, Haywood at 19 through towards the turn-off of Rochdale at 20's queuing. A lane shut, there's a breakdown there. Southbound M40, the outside lanes out from the Warwick services down towards the Gaydon turn-off, junction 12 queues there at the scene of a collision. If you're heading away from Bristol, northbound M5 at junction 18, that's the M49 turn-off, a lane shut on the entry slip there. That's all down to a vehicle undergoing a tyre change. Queues for half an hour, anti-clock on the M25 at the Dartford tunnels. Also anti-clock struggling from Maple Cross 17 to the M4 at 15. And in southwest Wales in Carmarthenshire, the A40 is currently part blocked and queuing both ways. That's due to a bump between Whitemill and Nantgaredig. And for now, that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 2:37. Now, here at GB News, we've been following the implementation of these hate crime laws in Scotland, and it's quite striking because Police Scotland are essentially saying they cannot cope with what's being described as now a deluge of hate crime reports under the SNP's controversial new law, and that's according to officers on the front line, so they should know what they're talking about.
Yes, around 8,000 hate crime reports were made in the first week of legislation coming into force, with further warnings that it's being exploited to fuel personal and political vendettas.
They were warned. Joining us now is Neil Hanvey, leader of the Alba Party in the House of Commons. Neil, thank you so much for joining us. Now, I understand you were investigated yourself under these new Scottish hate crime laws. The police decided that they didn't have enough to investigate. No crime was there.
Yeah, well, it's very difficult for me to speak with any confidence about what it actually was the police investigated, because the message was given to a member of my team in my office, and that they had investigated a tweet or tweets that I had put out, and they had decided that there was no further action to be taken and no criminal behaviour from myself. However, that leaves me wondering whether there's an on-crime hate incident now recorded against my name, and it gives me absolutely no clarity about who made the complaint or their motivations for doing so.
And this is the fundamental problem, isn't it? Clearly, police time has been spent on this. You're an elected member of Parliament. You've tweeted something that someone has complained about, and it's now had police time in Scotland spent on this. It's the most extraordinary situation. A similar situation to J.K. Rowling, who, if I'm not mistaken, we still don't know if a non-crime hate incident has been reported about her. This whole system is incredibly opaque.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's deliberately so, actually. I mean, the Scottish Government were left in no doubt that these types of vexatious complaints would be possible as a result of the imprecise language that they'd used in the drafting of this bill. They promised many interested organisations that there would be further clarity provided in the explanatory notes that would go alongside the bill. The First Minister, as Justice Minister at that time, wrote back on those commitments, and therefore there is no clarity about this, and that's why there's been so much uncertainty about whether you can be prosecuted for misgendering and other related issues. And I would say that that was absolutely deliberate. That was the intention, was to keep it opaque, because it means that not only would it have a chilling effect on political discourse, but it would also mean that somebody would have to test the legislation and go through that whole rigorous process of legislation or of criminal prosecution, only to find out that the provision of protecting free speech would have kicked in and prevented their criminal prosecution. But that just underscores that the purpose of these types of opaque legislation, there's been several of them by the Scottish Government under the SNP and the Greens, are deliberately intended to chill political discourse and target people who object to their queer theory ideology-backed policies.
Neil, do you think you should be able to tweet anything?
I think, well, that's a slightly separate discussion. I mean, I think the explanatory notes in legislation should be used to delineate where the line is in the types of behaviours that would come in within the criminal qualification. However, what could have been done in this legislation is that there could have been a carve-out for protecting political discourse, for example, around the heated debate over the queer theory policies, so-called trans issues. And that would have helped. If they had included philosophical beliefs and therefore gender critical beliefs within the meaning of the legislation, that would have clarified many of the positions that have been of concern, but they chose not to do that. The now First Minister did agree to do some of those things when the bill was being drafted, but I think he was instructed by trans rights activists, or as I call them, queer theory activists, and the then First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, to withdraw those clarifying points, and that's why the bill is such a mess, or they now act.
Yeah, it does seem that this has had a remarkable lack of oversight. As you say, a very opaque bill, and lots of people just simply don't know where they stand. A really, really messy situation north of the border. Well, Neil Hanvey, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate your time here on Good Afternoon Britain.
I mean, they just simply did not think it through.
Yeah, or
why did the Scottish Parliament allow this bill to go through in this form?
Do you know what I think it might be? A lot of people just don't want to have on their parliamentary voting record, I voted against the law trying to stop hate in Scotland. And you get all these websites of MPs and it's like, how did they vote? Voted in favour of hate. Yeah. That's what the websites would probably say. And so you get all these squeamish MPs or MSPs who don't want to say they're a hateful person, so they can't possibly vote against this legislation, no matter how terribly the legislation is drafted.
But what I would say about when Neil's saying there should have been something carved out for political discourse, particularly around the issue of transgenderism and the debate around that, well, then you need carve-outs for everything.
Yes.
So that would just show how useless, in my view, this legislation is.
Yeah, what political debate is acceptable in law and what political debate is illegal in law.
You can't
ridiculous.
carve out trans issues as being special, can you? But in other news, and this is exciting, millions of us are preparing for a total solar eclipse in North America later today. It's going to begin over the Cook Islands in the Pacific Ocean. It will then move across Mexico and 13 US states.
But you might be able to see it in the UK too. And let's have a look at the United States now. This is a graphic of hotel bookings on Airbnb. And you can see the orange banana that comes about on the 7th of April. That is where there is 100% booking rates. You can see it growing and growing, and boom, the 7th of April. There it is. That tracks the path of the eclipse. Really quite remarkable.
It is indeed. Lots of eclipse chasers out there booking in on Airbnb. Shall we speak to the astronomer, broadcaster and author Mark Thompson? Mark, this is very exciting indeed, and you can see from that graphic there of Airbnb bookings that there's a lot of people who are very eager to see this.
Yeah, absolutely, and it reminds me of the eclipse in Cornwall in 1999, where I headed off to the southwest of the country to try and get to see an eclipse in the UK, and equally places got booked out, but unfortunately not only were B&B bookings 100%, so was cloud cover for most of us.
Now, why is this such an exciting event for so many people? What is so special about seeing a solar eclipse?
Well, do you know, I think it's the rarity of the event. Now, we get eclipses, we get lunar eclipses and solar eclipses in particular, because the moon blocks the light from the sun from reaching the Earth. So we get a perfect alignment of the three, and there's a wonderful word that describes that called a syzygy. So during a solar eclipse, you see the dark black silhouette of the moon passing in between the sun. and the Earth, and it blocks out the sun from view for a period of time if it's a total eclipse, as it will be in America. And that gives us a rare chance to study the outer atmosphere of the sun, which is the corona, and hopefully, we'll get an opportunity to learn a little bit more about it. There's still a few questions we need to try and answer about the properties of the corona, but it gives us a great opportunity to study that. But also, it gives members of the public a great chance to see a rare, amazing, wonderful spectacle in the sky.
I mean, we know how many people travel to see the Northern Lights every year, and that's something that isn't as rare to catch a glimpse of as an eclipse. So you can just imagine just how exciting this is for lots of people. I mean, it's almost become a bit of a sport, isn't it, to chase eclipses?
Yeah, absolutely. There are people around the world who spend their holiday budgets travelling around to see solar eclipses. And I can understand it. They are the most spectacular things to observe, to witness, to experience. I remember, again, back in Cornwall, the experience of middle of the day and the levels of light just drop quite, not instantly, but very quickly. You hear birds calling and heading to roost. It's the most bizarre experience. You understand why people thousands of years ago actually used to sacrifice people because they thought the gods were angry with them. So you can kind of understand. Thankfully, we're past that now. But you can understand why people back then, our ancestors, would have thought that.
And Mark, just very quickly, for those of us that don't want to spend potentially thousands of pounds travelling to North America, we will be able to get a little glimpse of this in some parts of the UK too.
Yeah, if you're in the sort of northwest of the country, so up in Scotland, northwest of England, over in Wales and parts of and most of Ireland, you'll get to see a glimpse of the eclipse as it starts. And you'll just see sort of a chunk of the moon starting to encroach on the sun as the sun sets. Now, it's going to be very low in the sky. You'd be better off to be high up on high ground if you can to maximise your chance of seeing it. But the really important message is do not look directly at the sun. The best way is to try and either use eclipse glasses, which have got sort of it looks like tinfoil, but it's not. It's called mylar. Or if you've got a colander from your kitchen cupboard, hold that up against the sun, let the sunlight fall through the holes, and that will project a nice image of what
Fantastic. Mark Thompson, well, I'll be grabbing my colander and dashing up to the Scottish Highlands immediately after this show. Mark Thompson, thank you very much, astronomer, broadcaster and author.
Yes, Mike has written to us on Your Say. He says we visited Siberia, of all places, to witness a total eclipse of the sun in 2008. It's one of those bucket list items you have to witness to feel how eerie it is. That must have been amazing.
Yeah. Well, we've got some breaking news now. The killers of 23-year-old Cody Fisher have been sentenced today. The semi-professional footballer was killed in a nightclub on Boxing Day back in 2022. 23-year-old Remy Gordon and 22-year-old Cammy Carpenter have both been given a life sentence with a minimum of 26 and 25 years respectively for his murder. Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson will have the very latest for us very soon.
So they've both been sentenced, one for 25 years, the other for 26 years. Well, life with a minimum of 25 and 26 years. Shocking crime that was.
It was an absolutely shocking crime, and I think so many people have seen this affect them. I've seen the GB Views, the Your Say section of the GB News website actually full of comments with just how shocking this murder was. Cut down in his prime.
Was it just on the dance floor?
On the dance floor, or just outside, just by that nightclub. Really, no words to describe what a callous act of murder this was. And I think that a lot of people will think that potentially these sentences, 24, 25 years for what are fairly young individuals, they'll be out in their 50s. And I think a lot of people might think, gosh, is that right?
Yeah, should life mean life? Well, it was the 23-year-old Remy Gordon and 22-year-old Cammy Carpenter who have been given a life sentence, but with a minimum of 26 and 25 years, respectively, for his murder. We're going to bring you very latest updates from Jack Carson, our reporter, very shortly.
Well, moving on now, another bad day for Boeing, as an engine cover on a Southwest Airlines flight ripped off during takeoff of this aircraft yesterday.
Yes, the 737-800 aircraft had to make an emergency landing. Luckily, no one on board was injured, but the pictures are rather frightening, and it's not the only problem Boeing have faced in recent months. This is an image of what happened, a video clip of the, is it the wing that's just been torn off?
Well, you can see it's the engine cover there, and it's starting to fly, and it just continues to rip off. This must have been incredibly frightening. I like to, when I'm on an aeroplane, look out at the wing and sort of see how things are going. But my goodness, this must have been absolutely terrifying. But of course, there was another Boeing flight, Alaska Airlines this time, that was forced to make an emergency landing after the window and a chunk of the fuselage blew out 16,000 feet in the air. You can see the shocking images there. Up in the night sky, 16,000 feet up, when a bit of the aircraft just fell off. Again, no passengers on board were injured there, but another terrible headache for Boeing.
Yes, if you're a nervous flyer, that must have been absolutely horrifying. Well, joining us now is travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin. Sally, this isn't what you expect to happen when you board a Boeing.
Well, actually, increasingly, people are starting to expect an incident on Boeing, and you can imagine what's going on social media with this. The year started on the wrong foot for Boeing, as you just pointed out, with the incident with Alaska Airlines, and there have been several incidents in recent months. This is just the latest one, so confidence amongst the travelling public has really taken a hit.
And what's the worst that could have happened here, Sally? We're seeing the engine cover being ripped off there. Could that have caused a life-threatening malfunction of the plane? Could this have been far worse than it ended up being?
Well, the trigger to it, which was the cowling to the engine, which you could see was just coming away gradually in that coverage, that in itself is not a critical. You know, sometimes that can come apart a little bit. It shouldn't, but it has happened in the past. But the problem is so much of it came away and it then impacted the wing. And the problem was that the pilots at the front on the flight deck couldn't actually see physically that happening. They had to be told by the passengers and the flight attendants. So they asked air traffic control and they did an immediate return back to the airport.
Isn't the most remarkable thing, potentially, Sally, amongst all of these stories, I mean, a part of the aeroplane falling off on that Alaska Airlines flight, this sort of cover of the engine here being ripped off too, isn't the most remarkable thing that every single passenger on each of these flights survived, that there was no serious danger to life there? I suppose it shows that the safety on board aircrafts, ironically, is still very, very good.
It is still very, very good. Having said that, you know, there's nothing completely fail-safe about any particular incident. The really serious one was the Alaska Airlines one that you pointed out there. But actually, I would be concerned for the safety of that aircraft once the debris hit the wing and if anything was ingested into an engine as well, that's particularly worrying. But it didn't happen on this occasion and passengers were rerouted. But that's definitely not what you want to see when you're taking off.
No, absolutely not. Rather terrifying, actually. Thank you very much, Sally. Sally Gethin there, an expert on aviation. Thank you very much indeed. Gosh, I wouldn't want to have been on that plane. No. Either of them.
Although I do keep going back to this, you're much more likely to have a safe journey in an aeroplane than you are in a car.
You are, but...
It's one of the safest forms of transport that we have yet developed.
Yes, but the chances of survival, if something does go...
That's true.
...are pretty slim to none, I imagine, if you fall out of the sky. But not to scare you if you're heading off on a jet.
You're much safer on an aeroplane than you are on a horse, or in a car, or certainly on a motorbike.
On a horse. Well, there you go. That's it from us for today. But up next, it is, of course, Martin Dobney. Martin, what's coming up on your show, then?
Great show, guys. So, yeah, we'll have the full reaction to the two murderers sentenced for life for the killing of Cody Fisher on Boxing Day. Also, British Muslims, astonishing survey by the Henry Jackson Society saying 52% want to ban cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Of course, that is what drove the Batley school teacher into hiding. We'll have the Director of Research coming and telling us, does this prove we are living in parallel societies? And the Scottish hate crime bill, the Scottish Police Federation has been overwhelmed with complaints. We'll speak to its chair and say, is it time to solve actual crimes rather than inventing new ones? That's all coming up 3 till 6 p.m. on my show. But first, it's time for your latest weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Most of us will see some wet and windy weather as we go through the next 24 hours or so, in association with a feature that has been named by the French Met Service, Storm Pierrick, but it is going to bring some unsettled weather to many of us. Watch out for some heavy, thundery downpours across parts of the southeast as we go through this evening. Otherwise, it's strong winds across southern and western coastal parts that could cause a bit of a problem, and then some heavy, persistent rain pushing its way across parts of northern England and into Scotland as we go through tonight and into the early hours of tomorrow. Because of the cloudy, wet and windy weather, temperatures really aren't going to drop much for many of us. So a mild start tomorrow, but a pretty unsettled one too. Heavy persistent rain continuing across parts of Scotland. Could be some winteriness over the higher ground here. Otherwise, some outbreaks of rain for parts of northern England and into Wales, and a few showery spots elsewhere too, but something a bit drier, perhaps even a bit brighter across parts of Northern Ireland, Western Wales and southwest England as we go through the afternoon. Temperatures will be down several degrees compared to today, highs of around 13, possibly 14 Celsius at best. After a bit of a chilly start on Wednesday morning, it is going to turn wet and windy again from the west as some wet weather pushes its way in association with another system that's going to push its way through later on in the week, and there should be something of a drier trend across southern parts at least, and temperatures rising too with highs in the low 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to